Good evening and welcome to the May 2023 Town Council meeting, Town of Garrett Park. Call this meeting to order. We have with us a few new members. No, just kidding. We need to swear in. We're going to start off by swearing in our three council members, newly elected members. Barb, I didn't ask about this, but do we need to stand up or anything? Can we just stay right here or what's
You can sit if you'd like.
are you all good with that? Okay.
You want to?
I will just issue one reminder, please speak into your mic and your friends. If you want to make someone off running a Zoom can hear us, so the mic is your friend, hold it close.
One quick note, could you acknowledge that thanks.
So you all, our three swearing in ease, all have the language in front of you, but I'll have you repeat after me if you'd like. But I can be
You know what, Joanna, actually doesn't look like Elizabeth printed it out in the packet. So I think you're going to have to break it into parts like a wedding bell and have them repeat it.
You got it. All
All
right,
at once?
so
It's in here.
all at once.
Yeah,
Let's
you
do it all at once. I will give you the line and then you can repeat it. Okay.
Okay.
So I state your name.
Hi, Phil Schulp.
Oh,
Hi,
go ahead.
Todd Eisenstadt.
Hi, Stephen Peskowski.
Do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
Do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance
I will
and be faithful and bear true allegiance
to the state of Maryland
to the state of Maryland
and support the Constitution and laws thereof.
and support the Constitution and the laws thereof.
I will, to the best of my skill and judgment,
I will, to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice,
diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of council member of the town of Garrett Park
execute the office of council member of the town of Garrett Park
according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
You're welcome.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I will-
Congratulations.
Thank you, neighbor.
Thank you.
Wouldn't be here without you.
Welcome aboard.
Wonderful. I'm going to sign these real quick and then I will get your signatures. And while we are doing that, you can look at your agenda and see if there's any changes that need to be made to that.
I'd like to add a discussion item again.
Okay.
Go ahead. Let's see now.
So that's you.
What is okay?
Works for me.
Just because I just did it.
Excellent day. Right.
So the thing I wanted to add was one of the residents has brought up an issue with their driveway and delivery trucks not being able to get in and out of it. So I just wanted to bring that up to the council because I think that in order to do anything for the resident, we're probably gonna have to spend some money to have an engineer take a look at the situation.
What's the address?
Oh, it's just over on. Well, personally, hang on a second, I'll give you the addresses. I just. Very further. It's on Weymouth anyway. This.
Is this?
Phil, it's 10704 Weymouth.
Thanks, 1070, okay. 10704, right?
Yes.
Thanks, Weymouth.
Let's see. I kind of wish they were here to do this during presentation by residents. Do you have a request for where to slot it in? Or you just
I am fine with slotting it in anywhere we want. Maybe we could put it at town updates, might be a good spot for it.
Okay. All right, we can do that. Any other changes or corrections? All right. All those in favor of the updated agenda?
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Okay, with that, we move on to the next portion, which is the next item on our agenda is remarks from our delegation. We were fortunate to have dinner with them this evening and able to hear what they were able to accomplish on our behalf, and we'd welcome a couple of remarks. Senator Waldstreicher, would you like to?
Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the mayor. Thank you to the council members. Congratulations to our new council members, and thank you to everyone at home and here at town council. My name is Jeff Waldstreicher. I'm humbled to serve as the state senator representing District 18, which includes the town of Garrett Park. As the mayor mentioned, we just finished an enormously successful legislative session. The 4 of us, and you're going to hear from the 3 delegates in 1 second, are here to help. Both for the town of Garrett Park as a whole, and individually any constituent issues you may have. We're here to help. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague and friend, Delegate Eric.
And Senator Waldstreicher, am I correct in remembering that you are on our town listservs, and so you often will chime in?
I am, yes. Thank
Chime
you
in if
for
there's a
allowing us to be on the town listserv, and of course, if folks chime in on the town listserv with issues related to state issues that I can assist, I'll always respond and make sure folks are.
Thank you for that.
Hello, my name is Aaron Kaufman. I have the daunting task of succeeding Al Carr in the state legislature. I serve on the Judiciary Committee, but nothing is more important than serving my constituents. So if you have an issue with the state agency or Pepco or Verizon, I urge you to call my office at 301-858-3314 or aaron.kaufman@house.state.md.us. And I have a little listserv envy. Please add me to the list, Madam Mayor.
I think we can do that. Pretty sure we can.
It's an honor to represent the people of Garrett Park in Annapolis. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate
Thank you.
Kaufman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Delegate Emily Shetty. Thank you so much for allowing us to join you this evening. It was really nice to get to spend some time with the mayor and the town council members and town managers this evening to get to know you all a bit better and to share the different ways that we can serve the community. It's really an honor to have this job and to partner with you on the issues that matter to each of you. We hear from many of the constituents in this community throughout the year on a variety of different subjects, but we really encourage you to always feel free to call us and email us, and I too would like to be subscribed to your email list, please. Thank you.
I will clear that. Really nice to be here with you all, Delegate Garrett Solomon. Not that we have a favorite among our 9 municipalities, but your food was the best, so. Hospitality was to be able to bring bread tonight. Congratulations to you all. Thank you for serving. You know how important it is, and it's not for the pay, but we serve our community. So thank you for giving many hours with your family. As my colleagues have mentioned, you know, it's really wonderful to be able to partner with you all. Both Delegate Shetty and I serve on the Appropriations Committee, and one of the greatest things we get to do is be able to direct our state dollars to help our local initiatives, and really excited to work with the town on a whole variety of things, as well as also. Great to be here with you all tonight. Thank you again for the opportunity to have you here together.
Thank you so much for coming. Let's see, we're on the next, it's time is 7:41, and we will look at our minutes from the April 10th, 2023 meeting. We've all had the opportunity to look at these and make corrections in advance of this meeting. Are there any changes or corrections that we did not catch prior to tonight? Thank you so much,
you.
Delegate Kaufman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Not hearing any need to make changes to the April 10th minutes. All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Lisa,
Nope.
you're okay.
Aye.
Okay. Wonderful. Let's move on to presentations by residents. Is there anyone, let's start with the folks on Zoom. Anyone on Zoom that wanted to address the council this evening? Not seeing any hands raised, so I'll open up the floor to those in person here at Town Hall. Any residents present? No, not seeing any. Excellent. I like how this is going. Let's move on. Oh, sorry. Yes, Mr. Keller.
Last month when I was sort of.
Can we get your name?
Suggested that I was, Chris Keller, 4501 Claremont Place, post office box 30. It was suggested that I was being presumptuous to anticipate something on the agenda. So would you like me to wait?
What's the topic?
I'm sorry,
What's the topic?
the sidewalk
Oh,
and the retaining.
I see. Okay.
Among other things, it might be more efficient because if you're doing something that I would request, then I don't need to take your time.
I'm okay with your waiting until we get to those spots.
Great,
If you
thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to other presentations. Chief Judge Jenny Kravanek, would you please join us up here and tell us, we who already know how wonderful the election went.
Hello, Jenny Prevent. Just a brief, really, report on the election, which was held only a week ago. Congratulations to the winners.
Good.
It
Thanks.
was, I think, a very uneventful election. Everything went quite smoothly. We opened the polls at 7. The mayor's husband was first in line. This was the second year that we used the services of Electech. It was, we've had 2 elections post pandemic emergency order, so in 2 in-person elections. Electech has been used for both of those elections. It went very smoothly. The company produces the ballots. They provide the scanning equipment. There is a technician on site throughout the entire day. Should any issues arise, none did, but there is someone to troubleshoot if anything should happen. And
How many people voted?
We had in this election, we had 181 voters casting ballots. That is 21.75% of eligible voters. The last election, there were 27.3% of the voters. So, comparable. I should mention both elections have been uncontested. So considering that, it's not a bad turnout. We closed the polls at 7:30 on schedule. Got all the numbers together, validated them, and signed. We all 3 of the judges sign off. We called the winners to congratulate them. Spoke to each one of you personally, and the final results were announced by 8 p.m. So. It was, everything went very smoothly.
That's wonderful. And it looks like your co-judges
Yes,
are
I
also
should
on
give
the.
a big shout out to my co-judges, particularly Luis Stomorowski, who has been acting as chief judge for a number of elections in the past. So she's decided to step back a little and just be a regular judge. And Suzanne Kurt for the first time was participating as judge. So great work on there. And we had nice volunteers throughout the day to also sit at the polling table.
Wonderful. We're only a week out. Is there anything that you want us to sort of have in mind that we should consider for making changes for the next election in terms of process?
Well, you know, we had made some changes based on our experience from years ago. So I don't know of anything offhand. I think it really did go pretty routinely. I think now the town staff has really gotten their group together, and I really did. It went well. I don't know, perhaps they have some thoughts on things that could be improved, and also perhaps Louise and Suzanne, they may have some suggestions, but.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Can I ask any? Yeah,
Yeah, please. I'm sorry.
Jenny, I just had a
Jen.
question for you. So you were saying it took 30 minutes-ish to put together the results coming out of the Electech machine. Is that?
It took us about 30 minutes.
Come up to the microphone.
Yeah.
It took us about 30 minutes to compile everything, agree amongst ourselves that
Okay.
members were there, sign off, then phone everyone.
But the reason I ask is, I guess it was like 5-6 years ago, we did a mop-up of some of the town election laws in the charter and the ordinance. And one of the things we were concerned about, if there was a really big turnout for an election, it was really close, that you could have all the election judges there until really late, and that would hold up the old tradition, I guess, of having a swearing in here on the election night and ringing the bell, so on and so forth. Curious what you think. Is there a chance that with Electech that we'd run into a lot of extra time where it would be burdensome to the judges, or is that something we could consider going back to?
Go back
Doing
to
it.
the old.
Yeah, go back to the old, yeah. Mhm.
All ballots.
The old way, meaning of,
Like,
oh, you mean the old way of calculate of, you're saying
Not-
without
not-
Electech?
like with Electech, is there
Oh.
anything that would take more than, say, a half hour, an hour, or an hour and a half, where like we were concerned, like we wouldn't want the election judges to be up, with the pressure until 11 o'clock or midnight if it ever came to
Yeah.
that. So,
Imagine, I mean, you know, crop that would extend it that long, it might
Okay.
extend it another half hour, so if we had, huge amount of absentee ballots, for
Okay.
example, that would need to be
Okay.
counted at the end.
Yeah, and actually the absentee ballots do go through the scanner. I would say most of the time, I think we spent between the time the polls closed and actually announcing everything was just actually calculating the percentage of people who voted. Took more time than anything.
So we didn't have a hanging Chad problem here.
Yeah.
We did not.
Yeah, the ballots would be checked by the
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I mean, for the purposes of, I know the Citizens Association had been talking about perhaps doing a little celebration like the old days and ringing the bell, and you might want to add that, make it 8:15, just to give a little.
yeah, or even 8:30. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
In addition, this is Suzanne, in addition to thanking Jenny and Louise for making things run smoothly for me, I also wanted to thank Barbara for making things run so smoothly on election day. It was, and before election day, it was extremely helpful.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Suzanne.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much for joining the team.
I'm happy to be there.
Okay. Any other questions or anything about the election, council members? Okay. Let's see, the next item on the agenda is mayoral proclamation about National Gun Violence Awareness Day. This is, I just wanted to let you all know that this is something that we've issued. I've already signed it. And we are, Barb, remind me, we are getting a couple of spotlights to put in our
Yeah,
front.
I think what the maintenance staff plans is to get some floodlights and put orange bulbs in them and basically kind of illuminate the building, our buildings.
So these will be, it'll be a temporary fixture that we
Correct.
just pop in the ground and
Right.
have some orange
Mhm.
lights, just so we can really highlight that. Okay, the time is 7:50. We are doing great. Town managers reports.
Thank you. First up is just the financial report for the month of April. Just wanted to note that obviously with interest rates remaining high, on the positive side, it does mean our investment earnings are continuing to perform well. We have 2 months left in our fiscal year, and our year-to-date receipts for this category already exceed the budgeted amount by over $20,000. Also just wanted to mention, as you all recall, back in March, you authorized us to purchase some new equipment for the operational efficiency of our maintenance team. We did take one of our surplus mowers, put it on a governmental online bidding site, and we did sell that surplus mower for $1,400, and that shows up in 5.4 other receipts. Now just some updates on a couple projects. Obviously, as the mayor and town council know, as you approved back at your meeting last month, we did execute a contract with Wiedemann Architects to do the initial work for the town hall renovation. We had a project kickoff meeting with representatives from Wiedemann and Axius, which is their subconsultant for the building assessment and cost estimation portion of the project. And that kickoff meeting was held on April 27th. Wiedemann has really hit the ground running. The LiDAR survey of the building has already been completed. Greg Wiedemann emailed me last week to let me know that they'll be meeting with county HPC staff later this week. And currently, obviously, subject to your concurrence and your own schedule with the summer hiatus that'll be discussed later in the meeting. Wiedemann is tentatively scheduled to make a presentation at the town council meeting on August 14th. Obviously, that can be rescheduled as you all deem appropriate. In regard to the Yendel House demolition, we held the pre-bid meeting on April 27th. It was attended by 20 prospective bidders. I would note that's not 20 separate firms. Some of the firms did have multiple representatives in attendance. The closing time for submission of questions was last Thursday, May 4th. I'm currently in the process of preparing a bid addendum to address the questions posed at both the pre-bid meeting and those submitted by the deadline. Proposals are due by Wednesday, May 17th, and hopefully if everything goes smoothly, we'll be bringing forward a recommendation for a demolition company at your June meeting. Not in my report because it's kind of news that happened since then. Some of you may recall that late last summer, I did apply for grant funding for the Yendel project through the Community Parks and Playgrounds program. I had applied for just over $196,000 in funds to be used for both design and actual construction. And I got an email from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources Friday afternoon informing me that subject to Maryland Board of Public Works approval, they did approve the entire grant request.
That's good.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so that's good news. Hopefully that.
Oh,
means we
that's
can-
excellent.
What was the amount, Barb?
It was $196,471 to be specific.
And some of that will go to reimbursing us for work that's already been done. Is that correct?
No, there's actually two different grant programs. So this was sort of the question mark. The other was program open space. So we have an allocation. I'm going off memory here because we probably got some funds for FY 2024, but it's roughly $56,000. That grant program actually has a matching requirement. So what I put in the grant application for Community Parks and Playground is that the funding mayor and town council had already committed for demolishing the house as well as site cleanup kind of would constitute our match.
Okay. And going before the Board of Public Works, I don't recall, do they meet monthly? How often do they meet? And what are the prospects there? Is this?
It's really more the Maryland Department of Natural Resources
Okay.
staff taking everything forward.
Okay.
They just, obviously DNR wanted to confirm that we actually wanted the funding and intend to go forward with the project. So unless I hear anything tonight, I'm going to tell them that we are accepting the money. But it's sort of a perfunctory step. For program open space, we do actually have to have a more formal project design, kind of a layout, and then we would also go before the Board of Public Works for that.
But we can use this money for that design.
Yeah, I specifically requested funding for both design and actual construction work.
Now, are there any strings that come attached to anything we have to do?
There are some, and I can send those out to you all. You're not required. Basically, it has to, the project has to remain intact, and given the conservation easement, it has to remain as a park in perpetuity. So that's obviously not an issue. We're not required to actually have parking. They do have like walk-in parks, but if you do have parking, there are some ADA accessibility requirements. Those are the ones you don't have to have a restroom or anything at the park. But I can send that information to you all. Phil, I think you might have seen it because of the Parks and Open Spaces Committee,
Yeah.
but I can share that information with you all by email.
Okay,
Thanks.
so I mean, I think for Yendel Grove, I think probably the best thing will be to get this next phase done with the demolition. And then we'll circle back around. Like, let's not. I don't want to get started working on the next phase until we've got this one under control. So, all right.
Kind of moving forward, I did one, some of you may recall this, is that we did have an issue that was brought to our attention in late March at Cambria Park. The little twisty slide, some of the plastic had separated. So we have had caution tape around the slide. I've been in touch with the company that we bought the slide from. Equipment was put in about 13 years ago, so it is no longer under warranty. If that same equipment was bought today, there is a 15-year warranty on the plastic, but that wasn't the case at the time. I did ask them for a quote for replacing the slide. Parts are no longer available for it, so the cost of replacing that slide is approximately $11,000. This does include delivery and installation. Assuming that you all are comfortable with my going ahead and ordering a new slide. Unfortunately, it will likely be August by the time the slide's received and installed. There's a long lead time. So I did want to bring this up tonight to see if you all were comfortable. The only other option is basically to essentially put up some kind of barrier to, probably more keeping kids literally from not going around the caution tape, because someone could slice their hand going down on it.
I mean, we still have to do that anyway, right? Temporarily until the slide gets replaced.
Yeah, we might want to try to, block it off a little bit more.
There's some caution tape on it. I went by it yesterday.
It's still there.
Yeah.
We have had some issues with people taking it down, and
Yeah.
there is a hazard there very clearly.
Yeah,
Kids.
running it over. What would it cost to buy a new, replace part of the play structure? Because I assume the slide is just the plastic slide part, or
I sent them pictures of the structure. So are you talking about replacing the entire piece of play equipment?
right?
I don't have that information. I can ask them for that. The slide itself is considerably more expensive vis-a-vis the actual play equipment we bought 13 years ago. I mean, is that something you all want me to do and to hold up on ordering a new slide, or?
Just to ask a very rookie question, since this is the night for that. I mean, the budget for this is already, where would the money come from?
It's a good question. What I would probably say if we order it, is probably, I don't know if they require, some type of down payment or what they do. We would probably take it out of, in the capital budget, kind of the other public spaces. The funding that is there now is allocated for another project, which is the work at the community center. If we needed to put a down payment, that's where it would come from. And then we'd need to replenish the account when the community center project moves forward.
Is it possible, Barb, to find another bid? I mean, it seems like $11,000 for that little plastic slide seems like a lot of money. Is there another company that we could find?
Playground specialist, even without checking our files, I was pretty sure that's where the equipment came from, because it's where almost all play equipment in the metropolitan area comes from. I could certainly look, but they're the ones, since it was where they bought it from to begin with.
Right.
I think that would make
It
sense.
just seemed like a big number for a little piece of plastic.
Yeah.
But it does need to be replaced, and there are kids who are gonna use it at the pool.
Yeah.
So it would be good to make it as secure as possible
Yeah.
before the pool opens.
Okay.
But
It would be good to get a price for just replacing it outright too, because everything else is already, 10, 13. I think
Everything
13
was put
years
in at
old,
the
so
same, yeah, it's all part of.
Other pieces could break, and it might not be a ton more to just get a new one, be more
I
updated.
can check
So-
on that, and we
so
can
what
bring
should our
this.
process be? Should it be that we, that she gets those numbers and comes back to us? I mean, do you want to put this on hold for a month, or do you want to just, do you want to throw out a number as as long as it's not more than X, let's go ahead and move forward with the purchase of the full structure? Or what's the best thing?
I would probably suggest bringing it back, 'cause if just the slide component is $11,000. I think you will be shocked, as I probably will be, at how much the whole replacement structure is going to be.
Yeah.
So I think that might be something that you actually want to talk about and deliberate on next month.
The rest of the equipment looks like it's in pretty good shape. I just looked at it, not thoroughly, but I walked by it and
Yeah.
looked at it.
mean, so do we want to say that if it's more than, I don't know if this is a feasible thing, but if we want to say if it's more than $30,000, let's just go ahead with the slide or bring it back regardless, or how do you want to, I mean, if it's unlikely that, I'm imagining it's going to be above 40,000 to replace the entire structure. And if we're going to end up saying, no way, that's way more than we want to spend or able to spend right now, I wouldn't want to miss an entire month of getting that in place.
Yeah, the only reason I was suggesting you might want to have it come back is when you look at what the contingency account balance is in the capital budget. If it starts going much higher, you're actually talking about moving funding out of another project because it'll wipe out the contingency account. So that might be something you all want to talk about in a little bit more detail.
So let's just go for the slide then. Is that the?
Yeah, I'm not opposed either way. I'm just saying you might want to actually talk about it. If this isn't going to be installed until August anyway, unfortunately, we're missing a lot of the pool season.
Right.
And so it might not matter all that much if it is
Yeah.
delayed another month.
I mean, depending on when on August, because it gets towards the
Yeah.
end of August, which things can slip.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just supply chain issues.
Sure.
Okay, so we're not deciding today, this is going to wait a month. We're going to find out what it costs for the entire structure and we'll bring it back. No action taken until we know how much it's going to cost in a month.
That's what I think I'm
And
hearing.
also
Thank
see
you.
if Barb can find another bid to replace the slide, if there's another choice out there.
Yeah, and so Playground Specialists is just they're not the manufacturer of the equipment. They're just the ones who order it. So I'd
Right.
have to try to find some other playground.
I don't know, and I don't know if other manufacturers' equipment would match up in the sense of the structure working.
Yeah, it's going to be who
Oh.
carries the same line of equipment that they do.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Just kind of a quick update on the household organic waste compost pilot program. Unless Kayla has more up-to-date information as of the update she and I had at the end of last week, we had 45 households who had signed up for the pilot program. As a reminder, the town is providing a 50% subsidy for the monthly service cost. Of that 45, 14 were new signups during the month of April, and the remainder were prior compost crew customers who transitioned to the subsidized program. Kayla, anything you wanted to add?
Just a quick point of clarity for anyone at home, that is a 50% subsidy for the monthly cost of the 7-gallon bin. There is a more expensive 12-gallon. If you want that, the $11 per month that we are applying to the 7 would apply to that. You would just have then, I believe, 16 per month to apply. So far, I have not heard any complaints from anyone. It's been a relatively painless transition for those existing clients. If you're on the fence or have more detailed questions, obviously feel free to reach out to the office. We will get those answered. Otherwise, we're just gonna kind of let people use the service. In a couple of months, we'll probably circle around with them and say, do you like it? Thoughts, opinions, see where we're at. But for now, we're off to a good start.
Okay. We
In
have
the-
capacity for another 60-ish families or homes to participate. Holy,
It's just not the roof, it's on
I
fire.
wish I could say that had never happened to me.
We have the
before.
capacity for another 68 households. So if you have a neighbor who is interested, the signups are open. If you are interested, the signups are open. It is limited to Garrett Park residents. As much as we like our friends and neighbors in Garrett Park Estates, they're not part of the program. So unfortunately, they are just gonna have to hope Montgomery County expands the county pilot program.
How did we tell the people that how did we announce it?
So we have it floating around on the town forum and GPML that went out a few different times, got some reaction. Several folks had reached out to the office when council first started talking about the project and when we were getting things rolling with the contract award back in March. My apologies. It was March where council awarded the contract. So some folks have been kind of watching the website, reaching out periodically to go, so did I miss a sign up? When's that happening? And the part of it is with the existing customers, Compost Crew reached out directly and I think just said, hey, you're being rolled over. Congrats, you're now saving money. There was no real paperwork. There was no real sign up. It was just kind of you've moved over.
Would it be worth putting up a poster or something in the post office just to let people know? I just worry that nobody knows about it.
I appreciate your concern that no one knows about it. I think if you kind of follow the town forum, there's been some really good and robust conversations from various people about their history of
Yeah, I've read
composting.
that.
So I think there's some ongoing public conversation. We can look at posting something up in the post office. I don't know how much traction that will get. What I've noticed is the folks who are very excited about composting will keep talking about it, and folks who are a bit less enthusiastic will take it or leave it. So we can
Right.
look into posting something.
Thank you.
Moving on, just wanted to let you all know that I did file the required compliance report with the Treasury Department for our ARPA funds. That particular report covered the period beginning April 1st, 2022 through March 31st, 2023. There's obviously been a lot of conversation about efforts in Congress, particularly by the Republicans in the House, but also some in the Senate, to claw back unexpended ARPA funds. We are routinely in touch with our contacts at both the Maryland Municipal League and the National League of Cities. This is obviously a big issue for local governments across the country. I also reached out to our representatives in Congress, particularly in the Senate. Included in my report is the feedback we got from one of Senator Cardin's legislative aides. Basically, in a nutshell, they note that this was signature legislation, and they, while they could never say never, they found it hard, this is the quote, "It's hard to imagine a scenario in which they would yield to such a demand from Republicans." I also heard back from Senator Van Hollen's office this afternoon. They made a similar comment about where they saw this going. Having said all this, I did want to just mention to you all that there is tremendous flexibility in how the town can use its ARPA funds. We did elect to use what is referred to as a standard allowance option. And basically, when you elect the standard allowance option, essentially we have the right to use our ARPA funds for anything that falls under the definition of government services. That's a quote from the Treasury Department. Government services generally include any service traditionally provided by a governmental entity unless the Treasury Department has stated otherwise. So it pretty much leaves the door wide open in terms of what you can use ARPA funds for. We have obviously elected to use those as things stand now for the town office renovation and the renovation of town hall. Should the mayor and town council want to sort of rethink those decisions, I did include some examples, certainly not an all-inclusive list of other items that would qualify for the use of ARPA funds. One would be such traditional governmental activities, particularly in Garrett Park, of tree pruning. One of the things we would need to check with any of our current vendors under contract is whether they would be willing to have their contracts amended to incorporate certain federal contracting requirements. That would be a requirement for using ARPA funds. I also noted in my report that the mayor and town council could wish to, could decide to use ARPA funds for payroll costs. That is specifically allowable, and it's noted in the FAQ document that's published by the Treasury Department. Just to put it in context, the town expends approximately $43,000 per month for salaries and employee benefit cost. There's certainly a wide other number of options that we could use ARPA funds for. Really, it's up to you all, whether or not you want to stay the course with the two projects you have.
Is there any reason that using it for payroll as an example for months going forward, would that be a administrative burden, or is there any reasons not to do it?
There's really no reason not to do it. I think the tricky part that I think people are a little bit trying to get their arms around with payroll cost is obviously Maryland isn't, people are employed at will, meaning that you can separate any employee from governmental service, for any lawful reason. So it kind of calls into question, what is an obligation? How far out can you obligate payroll costs? Because in some ways you're suggesting that town employees are employed in perpetuity.
Well, can you do it can you elect to do
could.
it month by month?
Yeah, I don't think that would be overly burdensome. You file the compliance report once a year. Obviously, as we're starting to kind of pick up steam, for example, I processed an invoice from Wiedemann already because they finished the LiDAR survey and they had their kickoff meeting. I'm just keeping copies of any invoices that would fall. So when I have to submit the report this time next year, everything's already kind of pulled together.
Could
So-
we, since the previous report covered up through March 31st, if we were to want to do, use ARPA for payroll, we could do April. We could start with
We
April.
could do April. Ultimately,
Okay.
there would be obviously a budget amendment that would be needed. One of the issues that I would need to talk to Mary about is currently we depicted the ARPA funds kind of under the capital budget. Certainly payroll costs are not a capital expense. So there would be a need to rejigger some of the budget.
It would be
So
kind of a
structure.
loan and then it would get repaid.
Doesn't really get repaid. I'd have to figure out, I'm not an accountant, but basically we treated the ARPA funds as being capital monies
Right.
because the two projects you all previously elected were in fact capital. We would just need to figure out the accounting, but that's
Is-
certainly doable.
Right.
Is
but-
there any risk to the money? I mean, why would we
No.
need to rejigger this?
I would say there's a lot of downsides to having a divided Congress, but in this context, there's probably
Yeah.
benefits to having a divided Congress.
Yeah.
Certainly the feedback we are getting from our congressional delegation is that this was, signature legislation for the Democrats and that they're unlikely to agree to it. Senator Scott from Florida in April basically tried to attach a amendment to an appropriations bill for, I think it was the Fire Safety Act or something similar to that. There were required 60 votes because it was a appropriations bill amendment. Fell way short of that, didn't even get a simple majority. So can I sit here and say never, never say never?
Yeah.
Based on the feedback we're getting, the likelihood that this will be successful appears slim.
And not only that, but when they talk about a clawback, they're talking about money that is still at the federal level, not money that has trickled
Oh,
down
right,
to
yeah.
to local and state governments.
Yeah, the funds
I-
are in our bank account.
It's,
So
Basically.
if we use the money for payroll, then we use the existing payroll budget. We put it aside for capital projects. Is that
Right,
the idea?
exactly. You would essentially supplant.
Okay.
And I think
That's a good
Jerry
idea.
has a comment, I think.
hey, Jerry.
Shirley?
Hey Barb, thank you. I have similar questions to those you're taking already, but I was wondering if you had an estimate of how much by, say, mid 2024 we will have expended on Penn Place and Town Hall work, to sort of give us an idea of how much of the ARPA funds would be spent on that and how much we might want to consider moving to another
Mhm.
category, since construction might take us a little more effort to get underway.
Yeah, so if I can just kind of add on for those who aren't familiar with this. So with ARPA funds, we have to have the funds obligated by December 31st of 2024. And then ARPA funds need to be expended by December 31st of 2026. So as I said, payroll is a little bit awkward in terms of when you talk about what an obligation is until it's after the fact. But typically, being obligated means you have a signed contract. I would say for the town office renovation, if we're talking about December 31st, 2024, I don't know that I would envision that project, having any difficulties by that date. With regard to town hall, we have an existing contract to basically do a number of things. So it's a building assessment. It's getting cost estimates for the items that you all identified as being part of some possible renovation project. So once that contract is complete, then you all need to discuss what you want to include in a renovation project and kind of figure out where you go from there. So under our current procurement guidelines, and that's what they are, they're guidelines, they're not codified, and Kayla will be talking about this later this evening. But as your guidelines are written now, it would suggest that for professional services over a certain threshold, which certainly having an architectural firm develop documents suitable for bidding and assisting with the bid process, that's going to hit that threshold, which would suggest that you have to bid out that service. That's one of the issues what we want to talk to you about later tonight. So that would obviously take some time, or the procurement code could be amended. I certainly believe that professional services fall into a category all their own and are not quite like bidding out a truck. That's where I think, depending on what you decide to do from a procurement standpoint, that could take some time. Assuming that's not an obstacle, I would think you could get through this first stage. You make some decisions, certainly with community input in a relatively timely fashion. You hire Wiedemann or some other firm to basically go to the next step, which is to do actual construction drawings, prepare a package for bidding. I think then, and Stephen, you might want to jump in here, then I think the question becomes, how long does that take and how long does the bid process take? And can we get a contract, actually signed with someone to do the actual construction? My guess would be, and I think we talked about this at the last meeting, we had an estimate from Valadamas back from January of 2015 for a renovation of Town Hall, which was sitting at $1.5 million. That was without exploring a basement. Certainly costs have increased, and certainly right now,
That was a
bidding
long time ago.
a long
too.
time ago. And anyone I know who is involved, bidding out projects for construction are seeing prices extremely high. And my own personal feeling, and that's what it is, I think everything that was on the, perhaps if you want to call it a desired list or wish list for the town hall renovation, I think it's highly likely that we will be exceeding the available funding, even with ARPA funds. And that's where I think you all will have to make a decision. Do you move forward using, do you use ARPA funds as far as you can for that project? Do you scale the project back? Do you see if we can phase it? Or, do we seek any kind of federal earmark funding or a state legislative bond bill funding? You all met with the delegation before this meeting. As they indicated, I had a conversation with a member of our delegation last fall when we really did not have what would constitute a project. We had an idea. But to get in either to the federal earmark cycle or to get into state legislative bond bill cycle, we're going to be looking at next fall at the earliest for the state, and then probably into the following calendar year for federal earmarks.
So let me ask, we took the pulse. I don't even remember when it was. Maybe it was January, February, but it could have been last summer. I don't know about how we wanted to use this. And it was, I think one of the comments was that we wanted it to be meaningful. We wanted there to be some meaning behind our use of these funds. My inclination is to stay the course with what we have, because we could retroactively figure out how to move monies around to do salaries and benefits. My inclination is to see where we are in like January, when we still have time to take care of that shuffling or reconfiguring of the budget, and still have time to do the next reporting period, including that. And it gives us a chance to sort of make some progress. I mean, it seems like the reason that we would want to truly start spending down now is if we're nervous that we're not going to be able to meet the deadlines. And I'm not at all nervous about
Or if
that.
there's going to be a clawback.
Right.
when the
I don't,
funds Disappear.
yes. I mean, everybody that we've talked to has said that that's not going to happen because the funds are the only funds, and that are being looked at are ones that are still in federal hands, not ones that are in our accounts.
And how much is that?
was earlier.
What percentage is still in federal hands and what percentage?
Zero.
Do we
It's
know?
all here.
Yeah, our funding's 100%. in
Like
our
Garrett Park
Oh,
money
we-
is all here,
Right.
Oh,
but it's money that has not yet, it's mostly to do with health issues or health
Yeah.
policy things.
so we're good regardless of the clawback.
We can't
Presumably.
say 100%, but that is everybody that I've talked with, and Barb, please correct me if it's not different from you. It's not, they're not going to call us and say, hey, Garrett Park, send us your funds, write us a check.
Yeah.
You have the money in the bank.
The
Yes,
money's
we
in the
do.
bank.
So-
And that was very different from the way the federal government handled ARPA funds. Is very different from almost any other federal grant fund I'm familiar with. Basically you filed and it showed up in your bank account and the money's been there.
Right.
We just
So
have to spend it in a certain amount of.
Oh, let's do it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the question is, do we want to stick with what we're doing and wait until January-ish? And then say, okay, we only have 11 months at this point to get it obligated. We're starting to feel a little bit more nervous, or are we feeling nervous enough now that we want to take steps to spend it down in spite of the previous, going a different direction than what we'd previously said, being have it be
Just-
something meaningful.
One other question might be the total cost. If it was 1.5 million in 2015, it's probably 2 or 2.5 million now. If we, I mean, I don't know how much we have, but maybe we should think of doing the first 80% and then the last 20 later, or if we, without,
So this isn't our only money for this
okay,
renovation.
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. So, it's just a matter of, well,
Another thing about that study, a lot of people cite that study from 2014, 15. That as someone that used to work on doing this, it was a very odd scope that was in there. I think it was a lot of maintenance items, a lot of structural items that I'm not sure that were really necessary. And it was also very strange that it didn't really, it said that it was historic, protected at the county level, but it had a lot of recommendations in there that I don't think would have much chance at all of passing through county HBC. They were talking about putting imitation siding. They were talking about putting in new windows, and usually you can only do those things as a last resort. So it's in it that study also had a very large contingencies in it. So a lot of maintenance items. It was really not the kind of thing that we're asking the current architect to do, which is really say this building was built as a chapel in the 1890s, and then it grew. There was a Sunday school addition put on the back. There were bathrooms put on the front, like long before it became the Garrett Park Town Hall. So it's never really, since I think it was the 60s when it was bought by the town and turned into this, it's basically a meeting hall. It's not really a community center. But when it was turned into a meeting hall, it's never really been designed as its current purpose. So that was the goal of this new study, is to kind of say how should it be changed? How should the back addition be replaced? Should it be taken away forever? Should it be retrofitted with what it is? All those kind of things. And that old study didn't really do it. So
but it's
I
still
wouldn't-
valid that it's
got
going to
some
be
useful-
expensive. It's
Yeah,
going to be
yeah.
expensive,
It
and
could
we
be more
don't
than that.
have the information at this
Yeah.
point. Really, it's are we nervous, and do we feel the need to start spending this down now because we're nervous? That's kind of the question.
Barb, can I ask a question? How
Sure.
much in the Weedman contract with Axios is committed for them to do the 3 designs before we start working drawings? How much are we gonna spend on the current?
The current contract, I'm going off memory here, Lisa. I believe it's like 70, I'll be in the minutes, roughly $75,000.
Okay, so less than 100 grand.
Right. And basically that's a signed contract. So those funds are obligated.
Right.
You know,
So we can use this money for that.
correct. And that's, and
Okay.
actually that's what we intend to
That's the
do.
plan. Okay,
I mean, I
good.
think, assuming that you all are available on August 14th, I mean, you're roughly 90 days out from having Wiedemann come back with
Something.
numbers
Okay,
for you to discuss and to ask some
an
questions.
alternative design.
I mean, we
I think
also have,
should wait for that and then decide. What do you
we
think?
also have road work we've got to get done too, right? I mean,
We have road work. I mean, we have a number of projects that are in process, not to the point of bidding. I'd also say that, we've got highway user revenue funds that don't have to be expended immediately, but there's a shelf life on how long you can hold those without spending them. And we didn't have any eligible projects in FY 2022. I'm sorry, we didn't have one in FY 2023.
and we've got the community center we're looking at doing something
Right.
with. We've got the Waverly sidewalk at some point, doing something with that.
Yeah.
So we've got a few things, and we could retroactively pay ourselves for the wages.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem. That's our own internal. I mean, that's kind of where we say we want to book it. There would need to be a budget amendment. When you look at the, obviously ARPA kind of got rolled out. There were people who could go back retroactively with, filing their first report because it fell after a certain date before everybody had, the reporting together, actually. I think the important thing to keep in mind with some of the projects that have not been bid out yet is if in any way you're considering using ARPA funds for those, we should be notifying bidders that there would be certain federal contracting procedures that they would have to agree to. Once again, we have certain, current vendors, like I say, we have several companies we do pruning with. Those contracts that would need to be amended to incorporate those provisions.
So what do you think about staying
Excuse
the
me.
course? Putting a tickler to come back in January and say, okay, we now know how much further along we are in spending it. And that gives us 10 months to,
I would agree. I'm.
okay.
Or
I'm
even in
with that.
September.
Yeah.
maybe
September.
after we get the
Okay.
estimates?
We're not,
or-
I mean, a month isn't gonna be enough. To assess that, I don't think.
Oh,
No.
No,
okay.
but at least we would have the cost then, because the whole idea was to get kind of like a small, medium and large options. And I suspect that a lot of the community is going to want the large, and the large is going to be obviously the largest payment. It's probably a lot more than 1.5. So it'd probably be a good temperature check for us then to kind of know in the fall after we see Wiedemann's presentation, what kind of scale we think is realistic and whether we have to, try to add more money to the project or scale back. I think was said earlier. So that would probably help to.
All right, so
that.
Barb, sounds like we stay the course for now. Come back in September and say, okay, we now have receipts that we could
Right.
sort of retroactively use ARPA funds to reimburse.
Yeah, Barb, I would say to talk to Mary about the process by which you would do that. If
He
we wanted
already
to do
has.
that.
We had a brief conversation. I think we need to have a little bit more of a
Okay.
discussion.
Do that before September.
Right.
Okay.
Just to give it real quick, to give an idea of scale of doing a design project like that, because I think there is some confusion around the community on it. We're getting 3 bids and a building assessment to really get you up to a schematic level or a concept level.
Correct.
So it's really like 25 to 35, depending on what the project is and who the office is of a biddable document. So even when we have that presentation in
Right.
August, that's nowhere near bid ready. I think
100%.
of the community thinks we already have shovel ready on the shelf. Nobody wants to unroll it, but it's really the case where that's going to be 25 to 35%. So you have the other 2/3 to maybe 3/4 of the project to do. So it could cost 2/3 to 3/4 of what that fee was, the first one. Then you also have construction administration fees. So it's really almost,
Right.
3 times.
Yeah,
And what it is.
I guess my characterization of what we're doing now is sort of foundational work for decision making.
Mhm.
So
There's
Yeah.
a whole,
it's a design scope of work. is
right.
what we're trying to
But I
do.
think Stephen's correct.
very-
We have a lot of work to do
It's a
once we get that
yeah.
information.
It's very common for government projects to run this way, where it gets enough information for the voting body to be able to make decisions and then move forward with it. So, and I've seen it done both ways, where worked on projects where it was contracted so that the same architect could go forward, and a lot of other ones that you put together. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's something like this, where it's a schematic package, and then it's known ahead of time that the same architect can't.
Kind of
bid
like a
on it, and it has
design
to go
build.
Back out to bid again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
not something we can do to tack it on at
No,
this point.
yeah.
No.
But yeah.
So I think I have my direction.
Yes.
And then I guess the last thing I just wanted to mention is just give you an update on the security camera installation at Penn Place. We've obviously signed the contract. In my report, I noted that Kayla was working on the historic area work permit application and would submit it to Montgomery County Planning. She has in fact done that since I wrote this report. And she's received notification that this matter will be considered by County HPC at their meeting on June 14th. And other than that, I would just note that we have issued some building permits since your last meeting, and those are noted in my report. And with that, Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Do we have any idea when the cameras are going to be installed?
Well, we don't have.
We don't have the
permission.
permit. We're not installing until we have the permit. So I have reached out to our vendor to ask if we could look at an early to mid-July install date. That is assuming, of course, that county HPC grants our permit in mid-June. The parts are all in. They are sitting with the vendor. The vendor and I did a secondary walkthrough so they could double check what they have in their markings for installation. So I'm optimistic that we'll have these in place by August, but anything more concrete than that, I don't feel comfortable committing to until I hear from HPC what their
Right.
thoughts are.
Thank you.
You don't want to reverse. And my understanding is that, your information went to HBC, the town HBCs that are looking into it. Okay, that's what I saw. Yeah.
Because they're so booked up,
Mhm.
because their timeline is much more narrow.
Okay,
Nick Walls is over an email. You will get that email
okay.
within the next 4 years.
Yeah, I think she got the alert that it was coming, and then,
I
And-
know.
Mhm.
And the county, you'll get it.
okay, thanks. And usually she'll try to schedule a meeting a couple days to or maybe like a week ahead of this meeting, and also to make the deadline for getting information to the county.
Anything else for Barb? Okay, let's see, the time is 8:31. We're moving on to action items. The first item on this is thanking former council member Donna DeBosch for her distinguished service as a member of the council. Barb. Oh, wait, this says it's me. We have the resolution that we wrote. Am I supposed to read this whole thing?
I think it would be nice if you feel you have
I would
time,
be
or at least hit the
delighted. I would
highlights.
Love to read this. It's a resolution 2023-2, thanking Councilmember Donna DeBosch for her leadership of the town of Garrett Park and for her contributions to the Garrett Park community. Whereas in 2021, Donna DeBosch was elected to serve as a member of the town council for the town of Garrett Park. And whereas Councilmember DeBosch was designated as the town council lead with respect to the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, spending countless hours reading publications issued by the United States Treasury Department to familiarize herself with the associated rules and regulations. And whereas during her tenure, Councilmember DeBosch established and chaired the Recovery Funds Task Force, providing a mechanism for residents to provide input on the town's use of funds received under the American Rescue Plan Act. And whereas Councilmember DeBosch also played a key role in public safety matters, providing valuable input on the planned installation of security cameras at Penn Place, as well as various traffic-related matters. And whereas Councilmember DeBosch routinely conducted independent, in-depth research on matters before the town council. And whereas, as an elected official, Councilmember DeBosch was highly respected by both her colleagues and town staff for her quiet, calm, and thoughtful analysis of issues. And whereas Councilmember DeBosch was a model of civility and professionalism, always respectful of the opinions of others, even in disagreement. And whereas Councilmember DeBosch listened to resident feedback and concerns and always shared them with her colleagues to ensure transparent consideration of matters before the town council. And whereas Councilmember DeBosch decided not to seek re-election upon the expiration of her term in May 2023. And whereas Councilmember DeBosch has been both a colleague and a friend whose service as a council member will be missed by the mayor, the town council, and employees of the town of Garrett Park, as well as town residents. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the town council of the town of Garrett Park, in conjunction with Mayor Welch, hereby extends its sincere appreciation to Donna DeBosch for her service as a town council member and thanks her for her many contributions and dedicated commitment to the betterment of the Garrett Park community. And she has tears in her eyes.
Yeah.
We have for you.
Thank you. On the sign. one.
Happy- Open this carefully if I can, because I like opening presents. Mhm.
For real.
So much. It has been my honor and privilege working with all of you, the mayor, the council, all the staff in the offices. Truly, I am very impressed, as should you be, with everything you've accomplished in the last 5 years. I know that there's wonderful things that are going to be in the future, and I think you should all just remember and be proud of yourselves as well for everything that you've accomplished so far, because I've never seen so much movement in this town, and I've seen more in the last 5 years than I've been since I got here to Garrett. So thank you, and thank you very much. I really appreciate it so much.
Moving on. Time is 8:35, unfinished business. Assistant Town Manager Bucher. So this Councilmember Eisenstadt, want to just bring you up to date on this. We were looking at changes to fees that are charged primarily for building for things like building permits and demolition permits and other things that are specific to a particular residence, that takes specific time from town staff, but also that require consultation from professionals. So for example, our attorney, if there's a variance request, takes a good amount of time for our attorney to review it, fees like that. And so what we wanted to do is we've only up to this point had just kind of nominal fees for these things. And so this is an attempt to bring those fees in line with our actual costs without going overboard. This is not a money-making venture. This is merely
Breaking even.
So
Thank you for that lovely introduction and reminder, Mayor Welch. For those council members who are present at the March 13th meeting, as well as at the February 27th budget workshop, I will recap our history. I know it's been a long time since we've actually talked about this matter, but this originally came up when the manager of Glen Echo reached out to Town Manager Matthews saying, hey, what do you charge for a demolition permit? At which point we realized we don't charge anything. We require that they get a permit, but we don't charge anything. And that was a little strange. Some further investigation revealed that we have quite a few permits that we have not insignificant costs for, particularly variances are the ones that really stood out in terms of we couldn't really rack up the legal fees. And we, as Mayor Welch said, only charge a nominal fee. As part of your meeting materials, you have in front of you both the memo from March 13th, which does include a table and breakdown. I know council previously found this very helpful to kind of look at what we charge versus what other communities charge. And that kind of started the conversation. We took a pause in April to attend to other matters, but one of the requests that had come through had been for more in-depth math to be provided by town staff to speak about precisely how many billable hours we are being charged by our arborists, by our town attorney, how much staff time is dedicated to a project that benefits only one household in the community versus work we could be doing that benefits the community at large. That math is broken down in the May 8th memo. And you can see it speaks of the overall costs that we currently incur. Breaking down particularly the variance. What we charge is currently $50. Realistically, our costs have run closer to 1,300. That is a pretty substantial difference between what we charge and what the town is out for. When I was trying to explain this kind of situation to someone, I said, it's the difference between asking your neighbors if they mind if folks coming to their house to party park in front of your house versus asking them to foot the bill for your beer and then not inviting them. So we really want to make sure that we are focusing on things that can benefit the overall community, and that if someone wants something that requires additional time and attention, they chip in their fair share. As Mayor Welch said, this is not a moneymaker. If we were looking for ways for the town to make money, we would probably be looking in other corners of our budget. But the final kind of bottom quarter of the third page and then the back has the overall recommendations. What I'd like council to tell me here tonight is, do they feel comfortable acting on those recommendations? Are there any permits in particular where they feel that they would prefer to continue to only charge a nominal fee? Or is this wholesale not work that they want town staff to be pursuing?
Instead of increasing from 50 to 1,000 for the variance and from 500 to 2,000 for the new residential construction, might it be possible to sort of ramp those gradually and increase in other areas which are not as dramatically increased in this proposal?
We can look at that. I will direct your attention to the final page and a half of the May 8th memo. Further review of the time we spent as staff did drop the new construction from 2,000 to 600. So that is part of the further review. We can pursue a gradual ramping. Council would merely need to say, do you want to set it up so that kind of every year it kicks up a percentage? Do we want to say we only want to maybe increase by a singular dollar figure this year, and then in 2 to 3 years we'll reevaluate?
My only comment on these proposed changes is I didn't really find the argument that other municipalities are charging different amounts.
And we
Didn't
dropped
seem
that
compelling.
argument
Yeah.
and focus more on our unbillables, which is part of
Right.
why you have the memo outlining for variances. We do see, an average of 3 billable hours with the town attorney, who I believe starting July 1 will be charging $330 per
And I
hour.
think recouping those costs for outside people makes a lot of sense.
Then Councilmember Max, would your preference be to only increase the variance fee and allow the others to remain nominal? Would you prefer to increase the variance and the new residential construction? What I'm trying to find out and get guidance from council is, are there some permits that you say, we are going to make a deliberate policy choice of, we are not going to pursue fully recapturing the town costs?
Right.
So another way to do it, though, could be to not take into consideration town staff time. So for example, with the variance request, if we didn't do that, we would only be charging for perhaps the town attorney. That's one option
That would-
instead of the town staff. I don't know about the ramping up, because most of these things are just kind of a one-time thing that people, it's not like,
They're not renewing it like an annual pool subscription. It is a one and done.
Well, no, but we could ramp up the costs in 2 years. We could raise it 30% now, 30% in 2 years,
That is an
30%
option.
more in 4 years.
but that doesn't recoup our cost.
If we do it across the board for all, in other words, just redistribute the change in cost so that something doesn't go from 50 to 1,000, but rather goes up, but all of the permitting fees go up. Some might go up more than they're projected to go up.
Okay, is there support
Right.
for that? The idea of ramping it up?
Yeah, or another one, I was wondering if maybe instead of going up so sharply, it would be nice to recoup some of the funds, but there is sort of the pool. We are a community. We all pay taxes into to have the town government do a lot of these things. I wonder if maybe like doing it where you kind of have almost like we're doing on the compost program, where you have skin in the game, you're paying 50% of it to recoup those costs, but then the other 50% comes from kind of town funding. So I'm wondering, like, maybe instead of like 1,300 for a variance, go somewhere like 600, and same with residential construction. That seems 600 is not too bad, but still.
Well, so
um,
I'm gonna argue with that, even though I don't get a vote, and just say that one of the reasons that we have opted to supplement or to help pay for the compost is for the greater good of the community of the world.
Mhm.
I don't know when we built our house, if anybody else benefited from that to the point that that somebody else should be.
I would argue that the whole town benefits when all the houses get
Let's see.
better.
I would agree.
Yeah.
So
I would
think
agree
with the mayor.
with
sorry, Jerry Lee, go ahead.
I just want to say that I agreed with Phil and Stephen on that point, that when neighbors choose to improve their homes, that we all benefit from the look and feel of the town, keeping it keeping things in good shape, and also property values can be increased through certain improvements. I'm also sympathetic with the argument Stephen made about that we all pay taxes, we all pay extra taxes to be part of Garrett Park. And everyone who gets a permit for Garrett Park, for the town of Garrett Park for construction, also has to get a county permit and pay those fees. And so I'm not hugely in favor of doing things that make it seem more painful to be in Garrett Park. I want people to have a positive feel about being a resident of Garrett Park and the benefits they get from paying those extra taxes.
Okay, so are you saying that you don't want to change the fees structure at all and you want to keep it as it has been?
I'm suggesting, I don't think either Stephen or Phil suggested not changing at all, but just maybe, I think Stephen had actually a pretty good idea there of thinking of it as maybe like a half and half, where yes, it's maybe time to update them and modernize our fees, but I don't think we need to go so far as to say that we're attempting to recoup all of our costs.
Agreed. Well said.
Geraldine, are you including staff time or third-party consultants? Or both?
Well, the documentation we received include both. I think the idea of thinking about it more in terms of the third-party consultants versus the staff time might help us to give a better gauge.
What about, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to diminish the eventual cost recoup. I don't agree that this is a community service. I think that this is more of an individual service, and I think people should pay for their variance designs, but I mean, I guess it just seemed like a dramatic increase at one time. I guess we could consider, some sort of idea where external costs would be offset, but perhaps not staff time, if maybe that would be some sort of compromise that would be acceptable.
To me, that makes sense. We look at our actual outside costs. I mean, some of the rest of it's going to be buried in other taxes. And as has been said previously, I think everybody benefits from having, nicer places put up additions and so forth. And like Jerry Lee had said, the property value of that property will go up, which means in the end, they will be funding themselves. It's just a matter of them paying the taxes eventually.
Kayla?
So my understanding from council at this point in time is that you would like me to come back in June with a proposal that solely focuses on the billable costs that we incur from our town attorney and from our town arborist. You would like to see a proposal that looks at full recapture of those external billable costs or 50% partial costs. I've not heard any other percentages. Just to make sure I have clear what I'm doing moving forward. It's either 100% of the billables or 50%. At the June meeting, council will take a vote and determine which of those two options they prefer to pursue. At which point we would hopefully for the FY24 year be able to have an updated fee structure. Is that a correct understanding of what council wishes me to do?
And I will add one slight twist to that to say that in cases where there is no billable time from an outside consultant, we consider a nominal fee increase.
So
If that
you're
makes-
saying even for something like a deck or a fence permit, which has not been recommended for an adjustment, you would like to see a nominal increase?
Well,
Am I correct?
yes,
Okay,
but just,
I would agree with that. I mean, that would
Um,
redistribute the burden.
right.
all right. I will simply interject because Town Manager Matthews has raised a point that I do agree with. Can I please have an operational definition of nominal? Is nominal $5? Is it 10%? Is it some other figure?
15%?
250. Because we all know what,
What should be a percentage? of
Yeah.
the
oh, if you want
fee,
to do percentage of, oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, percentage of the fee.
Right, as a nominal increase.
So I heard 15% from Councilmember Eisenstadt. Is that everyone's comfort level as
I
a,
agree.
15 seems reasonable.
okay. So we will come back in June with updated costs for what would be nominal for looking at increasing decks and fences and similar. We will have updated figures for outside billables for variance and for new residential construction at the 100 and at the 50% cost level.
And could we get a list of all of the kinds of permits? I mean, I guess you'll be increasing all of them, so we'll know what they all are.
The direction from council has been to look at nominal increases across all permit fees. We don't have a wide number of permits compared to several other communities in the county. There are several permits that we do not require that other communities do. So it will not be a long list. I would anticipate somewhere in the ballpark of a 1 to 2 page listing of permits at their current level and then at what they would be with the nominal increase. So similar to the table you have from March 13th,
And do you know what I mean, you've done research, so you know what other communities charge
Yes.
for that we give for
Yes.
free?
So
Could we know that too?
we could have a list of permits that the town does not currently require, but that other communities do.
But
That-
those are permits we don't require. It's not that we don't charge for them.
It's not
It's
that we
not-
don't charge for them, it's that we straight up don't require it.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
a better comparison might be, we don't require you to take an Eastern European history class as a gen ed. We just say, you don't have to. So I can still compile that information and include it, but our work has so far focused exclusively on permits that we do require town residents to get,
Yeah.
and particularly the areas where we are seeing the highest
but
ratio.
we might see whether we want to add additional permits and thus generate more revenue and thus lower some of the costs in these other areas or keep them.
My
No?
thought as I listen to what you're requesting, Councilmember Eisenstadt, is I would prefer to do that as a separate memo. I would like to have a singular memo of our existing permits at a nominal cost
Mhm.
and what that would look like, because that has come before council several times. You are all familiar with it. You have all had time to consolidate your thoughts and articulate them to me. The idea of creating new permits from scratch that town residents are required to get is, to my way of thinking, a separate and secondary matter. I would prefer to address it as such, so that council has time to ask their questions and to address as appropriate. Is that acceptable to the group at large?
Fair enough to
Part
me.
A, part A and part B then. So-
Part A and part B.
Kayla,
Yes,
I would
Councilmember
like a
Bennett.
clarification. Thank you. I would like a clarification on that, though. Even though we don't currently have a demolition permit, we had already identified that as one that.
So, Jerry,
if-
that is incorrect. I'm going to hop in there. We do require people to get a demolition permit.
Oh,
We
but the
just don't
fee, the
charge for
fee.
it.
Okay, but are we keeping that on the list of ones that we want to add a fee for? Because that seems
Yes.
to make sense to me. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's gonna stay on there because it is an existing permit. Kind of the split in my head for part A and part B, as Councilmember Paskowski called it, is, does it currently exist in some format? In which case it will be part A. If it does not currently exist in the town of Garrett Park, it will be captured in the second memo, part B. That to me is the easiest way to delineate what we're trying to do and to keep it understandable for council and also for residents at large.
That seems reasonable. Thank you.
If I can ask for a clarification, when we talked about this matter back in February at the budget work session, one of the things we've obviously been having this discussion moving towards is a fee, actually a formal adoption of a fee structure. As I mentioned at that time, the town's traffic fines, parking fines do not appear to have been properly constituted according to the town attorney. So is Kayla bringing this item back strictly for discussion again, or is she to incorporate the direction you provided this evening into a fee resolution to be considered for adoption?
Next month.
That's what I'm asking. I'm not clear on whether you're having another discussion and then the fee resolution would bump to July,
Or
assuming you even meet.
Does it have to, since it's an ordinance? Isn't it an
It would
ordinance?
be, a fee resolution is usually adopted by resolution. Like I say, if nothing's gonna, if for some reason you decide not to do anything on the permit fees, I would like to do the parking fines and the traffic violations because I don't think they legally exist today. So I'm just trying to get a sense of where this is building to. So Kayla's clear on, and I'm clear on whether we're bringing back a fee resolution, incorporating your direction for the permits, or you're going to talk about the permits again, independent of any fee resolution.
Would the fee resolution be part B as?
Yeah.
You have
It
to
would
be,
be part C.
it would be for A. It would be a resolution about
Okay.
A.
So
Oh, okay.
part A
Okay.
would be
Okay.
a fee resolution that says, per your direction tonight and at prior meetings, this is what we charge for permits, whether that be $0 for demolition or $250 for new residential. This is what it would increase to under the direction given to me tonight. That would be part A. If council chooses to vote on and the resolution were to pass, it would go into effect.
Okay.
That would be separate from the creation of new permits.
Okay.
So could we just have a permit available so that we can decide on the spot? Or is it what?
We could have a fee resolution
Yes.
available so that if council likes what the numbers work out to be, you can vote and we can have that ready to roll out. We can have that prepared relatively easily.
My suggestion would be, because there's, obviously the reason you publish an agenda and there's public notice is that people understand what's coming. What I would suggest, if it's something you're even considering, is that it go on the agenda as a possible adoption of a fee resolution. You can either change the amounts in it or you can defer action on it. But I would not want to just convey to the public that you're just having a discussion and then something gets enacted without prior notice of the same.
So are you all feeling comfortable that we might be able to come to a decision at the next meeting? I guess that's the question or do you think that we're going to need another holdover?
We've got two separate issues. One's a fee structure for parking and other odds and ends that we haven't discussed yet. And the other one is the permits and so forth required for building and so forth. And I would think that building permits and so forth would be one thing. And then part C could be the other odds and ends. That way we split it, we get done with the building permits, hopefully. And if there's discussion happening with part C, we're not dragging down the building permits.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on changing anything with your parking fines. It's the ones that have been on the books dating back to Gene Swearingen that just weren't done appropriately for
So
whatever
just be
reason.
putting them in resolution form.
Correct. So
Okay.
they're
So
actually
it's
being
legal.
adopted. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
They'd be legalized.
And a
Honoring them.
process for actually doing.
Yeah, what it appears, just by way of history, is I've been having some discussions with the county because of the codification project we've been working on, and there's been some questions about are not adopting certain sections of county code is where this started. So then I followed up with the town attorney, and it appears that at a long time ago council meeting that basically the ability to come up with a fee structure was somewhat delegated to Mr. Swearingen, which would not be appropriate constitution. They have to be adopted by you.
I would like to notify it in the next agenda as adoption.
For both.
Yeah,
The permit
yeah.
change And then the adoption of. the fee
Yeah,
structure.
so if I may, normally when you do a fee resolution, many places do them every single year because they're constantly reviewing their fees. But basically anything that's not in the code, such as a municipal infraction, basically would go into a fee resolution. And so that's reviewed as part of your budget process every year.
So this would be a single resolution that
Correct.
incorporates both permit fees as well as parking and
Traffic,
traffic
correct.
So those are
violations.
just permit fees, which we may want to increase as well, right? If they were done so many years ago.
Yeah, I would just probably, I think in the interest of time, since you haven't discussed it, just to get something legally on the books, is just adopt what has been in place for many, many years. And then just have a goal of reviewing those if you wish to do so, prior to the next fiscal year.
So any concerns about putting this on the agenda as a resolution adoption? I mean, if
Yeah.
we
parking.
still need,
Yeah, I mean, the other option is you just
Yeah,
have
that would
another
be okay.
discussion and we bring back the resolution in July.
we could always vote it down. or
Correct. You
table
can
it.
always just
So
table it.
I'd rather plan on being able to adopt it. Kayla, does this do anything for you? Does this, other than frustration of
I appreciate the robustness of the conversation and it's at this point paperwork. I have the research, I have the existing memo. It's not going to significantly increase the administrative burden of reformatting that information. So I'm going to be prepared and ready for June, and we will see how council votes at that point.
Can we discuss part B, possible new permits but not take a final vote? In other words, start the discussion on part B as well.
Next time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it sounds like part A and part C are the ones we want to adopt.
Yeah. And is it possible, Kayla, for you to put together a short list of potential items for part B between now and then?
So my understanding of part B is that council would like to see a list of permits that the town does not currently require, that it could potentially require. And as part of that, could potentially require some cost estimating of what could be a reasonable fee for that. Councilmember,
Yes.
is that?
Yeah, and some of it, there might be some things that are kind of in a gray area. I know one that's been talked about a lot is if a builder say wants to buy a house, tear it down and build a new house, there's nothing really in our permitting structure to kind of protect the right of way for the trees and for just cutting the curb, putting back after there's patches in the street. So I think that, and Jenny Kravanek may remember, I think it's like a $25 fine if you damage a town tree, or $50 something. I mean, $50 in a pack of gum. So those kind of things would be worthwhile looking at.
My
To see.
understanding is that the fines for damaging a town tree are in the code along with some of the paperwork requirements for actually protecting them.
Mhm.
We can touch on them as part of the overall memo, but it's not going to necessarily be like we don't require a swimming pool permit.
Mhm.
To my knowledge, some other communities do have a separate permit because of the
Yeah.
potential safety hazards and the need to review a layout to make sure that, we don't have children cutting through a backyard and.
I guess my
drowning.
point was like, is 25 still a valid number if there is damage, say with a forklift into a
I
tree?
mean,
Or should that be
That's a
1,000?
that's
So-
an update
Okay.
question, and that can be something that we look at. I can look at what other communities have. I think in the interest of timeliness tonight, I have enough direction to get started. If there's a
Mhm.
particular permit or concern you have, I would ask you all to email me after the meeting, and that way I can make sure to fully capture your concerns in the
Okay.
documentation for the June meeting. But I also know that we have several other items on our agenda, and I would hate to take time away
Yeah, we
from
can't
Town
just
Manager
go.
Matthews when I know she has things that she needs to cover with you.
Okay.
All right. Oh, the time is 9:02. Town Manager Matthews,
Thank
were there
you.
any updates that you wanted to provide with regards to the wall repair at the pool property?
Sure, and Councilmember Paskowski, when I made a mistake earlier when I texted you, I forgot you were not a Zoom participant, so I can't make you a meeting co-host. Is it possible for you to
Okay.
email me and I can bring them up? Would that be okay?
I can't, I'm not sure if I can. I had to get my internet to work and then.
Yeah, if you email it to me, I can just do the kind of the introductory comments and then I can bring up the photos. I can just share my screen
But it's something I need to like toggle.
back and forth.
The photo,
Okay.
it shows old and new. I mean, I could show it just on here, or I could try to bring up the internet. Let's do it. Okay.
Yeah,
I have an iPad. Would that help?
yeah, I think it's just gonna be a matter
You want
of.
Zoom? I
Y-
think, let me see.
Yeah, well, I think the problem is since he's not participating in the meeting virtually, I
Oh.
can't make him a co-host to share his screen,
Oh,
so.
so he needs to.
St-
all right.
Yeah, Stephen, if it's doable to basically send me the files and I can even step back from my computer if that's easier for you to be able to toggle back and forth.
Would it be okay if we moved on to the next item and
We
came back
can.
to the
Yes.
wall?
We can certainly
Um,
do that.
So just so y'all know, we have 57 minutes before I fall asleep.
If you don't have time for this, I can.
It's okay. I'm just.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and do the train
Slow
exhibit. So
injection.
this should be relatively short. So you all have had a number of discussions regarding a commemorative train exhibit at Penn Place. This first came forward at your March meeting when Garrett Park resident Dave Almy addressed you about the proposed exhibit. You had a follow-up discussion at your April meeting. There was some discussion about concerns about the exhibit's accessibility at the proposed location, as well as whether the exhibit should be installed at an alternative location at Penn Place. After the discussion at the April meeting, there was majority support for staying with the installation location that had originally been proposed by Mr. Almy. The only remaining issue that was still lingering at the end of your discussion on April 10th was there was a desire for some clarification of how the drawings of the houses depicted in Mr. Almy's presentation materials would be portrayed. Specifically, whether or not these drawings would be displayed as perhaps some sort of mural kind of screen printed on something that would be installed along the balcony ledge, or whether they would be framed. Councilmember Schultz kindly offered to follow up with Mr. Almy to get clarification on that. And with that introduction, I'll turn it over to him.
Wow, it's longer than the answer will be. Thank you. No, so the answer is pretty straightforward. He's going to paint on a type of cardboard, a mounting cardboard that will be flexible, that can be adhered to the wall conceivably with 2 staples or some other type of removable fastener if the town should ever desire to take it down. So there'll be basically pre-painted units that will be affixed to the wall that can be removed whenever you want, and they will should be minimal to put it up. And we also, Dave and I also discussed it, if there's still an issue concerning leaning over the balcony, considering that we could also consider putting up a short piece of plexiglass or something similar on top of the existing rail or wall to make it slightly taller to prevent people from going up there.
I still have that safety concern about it. Sorry, I missed the last meeting, but it's not even about leaning over, but I've seen my kids and other kids when they're going down that hallway, they see down the well below, they want to look down, you hear somebody. I'm worried, and we always avoid this in public buildings when I work as an architect. You want to avoid something where people can't see below, they might be curious and then they're going to hop on it to look over. And if they know there's a train on the other side and some other thing that maybe they could take a peek at, I think they might just be more tempted. I'm still very concerned about it. I'm not sure who would hold the liability if somebody did go and jump and fall, because it's not going to be pretty if they fall.
That would be us, I'm sure.
Yeah, and then I don't know, like I don't think it would be approved if I was doing it in a public building like where I work to do that. So I still remain concerned about that, and I'm not. I love the history of the town being on the railroad, and I've read up on it a couple times, and I know as much as almost anybody in the town about it. But to me, it's just not very compelling to have just drawings of some houses that you can go see in person and a model train that's sitting up, 10 feet up above your head when you come in. I feel like I'd rather have a more meaningful kind of a historic look with old photos or so on and so forth around than that. I just haven't been convinced about this proposal to do it. I love the idea of doing something to show that history, but I'm just not sure that this is one that really it's maybe our best option.
Well, as David mentioned, I mean, you could take them down at some point in the future if you decide to do something else. We could also modify the railing if necessary. And I can say that I've been told by several people that kids have been known to hop over that fence anyway. So putting up something as a way of just preventing people from jumping it or making it that much more difficult wouldn't be a bad idea either.
So
And the cameras also might be a deterrent when they're up, the internal cameras.
Right. We also got camera.
What about
check.
the plexiglass that was mentioned in?
That's what he's talking
Oh,
about.
That's what I'm talking about. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I like the plexiglass idea. And I really look forward to the installation of the public art concept there.
Yeah, I happen to think it's a really cool idea too, and I'd like to see us do it.
That makes me too.
Yeah, it sounds good with the plexiglass.
Yeah.
So are you saying, I'm holding up a picture that was provided in our memo. You're saying plexiglass going above here?
Right. To make it slightly taller so that it's.
So on the restaurant level where the wall is, I don't know, waist high on me, I don't know, somebody else might be knee high.
It's like a
But-
42-inch rail.
Okay, but
That's
putting
the code.
plexiglass above that.
Right.
Right.
It would have the curve around there.
Up here where
Yes.
the kid's
Right,
head is,
right,
would be above
right.
that,
Okay.
right?
Right. They would have to follow the curve of the railing.
But it would be like different posts would have to hold in the plexiglass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Wow.
solves some of the problem, do you think? Stephen?
I think it'd be ugly, actually.
I
Not
do
a fan
too.
of
I've seen those kind of
plexiglass.
things done before. I think it would be a little bit ugly.
Plexiglass I'm talking about.
Yeah, the other thing you could do is maybe there's codes about how railings work, and above 42 inches, the code is, there really is no code. The code goes up to 42 inches. The other thing you could do is we've done this on other buildings, or maybe there's a stairway that's way up in the air, is you could do horizontal bars that go across maybe every 6 inches, and maybe those are on posts. That could look a little bit better, maybe. And they would do kind of the same thing. Maybe you'd bring your level of protection up from 42 to 54.
Wouldn't that block the people's view of looking at it though?
If you shouldn't be looking at it from above anyway.
Okay.
And that's why I kind of wonder if there's not a better way to show the history of, railroad connection to the town here, like. I'd rather see it stay the way it is myself, and it seems like I'm outvoted 1-4 on it, but I'd rather see it stay the way it is and see something that's more down at eye level, whether it's down where the post office boxes are, or throughout the post office, or in this building, or some other way, even in the stairwell going up to upstairs. A lot of other things could be done versus, I think it's hard to picture, but when you go in, like you're coming in the door and up about where that vent is, that's where you would have this diorama.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah, we
No.
did last month. It was unanimously approved
Mhm.
to move forward with this.
And Dave is excited about it for sure.
Barb, so we've gotten the information about how the houses will be affixed. Are there other things that we need to take into consideration?
Not that I can think of. I mean, I think the compelling question has been concerns about safety. You all talked about that at your last meeting, as the mayor indicated, at least the 4 council members who were present at that time were, supportive of it.
As I
so-
recall, Barb, you were gonna also ask our maintenance guys if they could help put it up. I think that.
Yeah, and I did. They were fine with that. Yeah, I don't think, I understand Mr. Almey's concern about being on a ladder. So
Okay, so,
it-
I mean, we already said we wanted to do this. So is there anything else required, or we just
I don't think so.
give
I
it a
mean, I
thumbs
think,
up and say, let's go?
yeah, Mr. Almey wanted to go ahead and move forward with buying, I'm probably gonna get the technical term wrong, but the train.
Train.
It's train set.
Right, and what he came up with was less than what he originally presented to you all back in March, and so I can't imagine there's any concern about that.
So, but we should be clear that he shouldn't purchase this. This is something that'll need to come through the office.
We can do that. I can reach out to him tomorrow and just ask him if he can send me the information, and we can make arrangements to just purchase it directly.
Right. But
If he can.
but it's a purchase that has to be done
It
through the
would,
town.
it would probably be more appropriate for us to do that. And also I hate to have a resident fronting money if they don't have to.
Right.
For something that the town has wanted to do.
Are we exploring a barrier, or just leave it be with the railing that's there?
There seemed to be at least some shared concern about having some type of barrier or something to, limit access by leaning over. George is currently on vacation, but I can certainly discuss that with him, or Stephen, maybe you and I could talk a little bit about your alternate idea as opposed to the plexiglass.
Yeah, I could call him and talk with him about it, but I think that
Yeah.
could work. It's
Yeah.
just a railing extent, or guardrail really is what it's called, an extension,
Yeah.
so.
He'll be back, and what I will do is I'll email him, because like I say, he's currently out of the office, but I can just email him looping you in, and he'll connect with you when he's back next week.
And I had talked to Dave about possibly electrifying it at some point, but that's something in the future.
Okay.
Just as a question regarding the railing, how about a cable type setup like you see on some stuff? Like on some decks, people use like a cable through post, is that?
You could do it. I guess that would work functionally. I'm just not sure it would fit into that space. And I just
Okay.
had another thought on it. I wonder if maybe it's the kind of thing we could loop in Wiedemann too, because they worked on that building. I wonder if maybe for a small fee, maybe they would do
That
a
would work.
proposal
Yeah.
to kind of bring it up. I'm sure they've done it in other.
Sure, I
buildings.
can email Greg Wiedemann and just
Okay.
ask him if he could maybe give some thought to that.
Yeah, maybe recommend a height, or
Right.
Another 24 inches or something is what you're thinking.
and maybe not even that. A lot of times we'll bring these up to like maybe
18.
4.5 instead of 3.5.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's usually
Sounds good.
like at stadiums, you'll see it a lot of times. The railing will be higher than you'll see elsewhere. So.
Right. Time is 9:15. Let's, we're gonna talk about the alternatives for the wall repair at the pool. There were a few items that we had sort of on the to-do
Sure,
list.
sure.
Things for you to, more information for you to gather, Barb. Could you?
Yep, I'll just report on the follow-up items, and then I think, Stephen, you should be all set up to, as a co-host, if there's something you wanted to show. So when you discussed this matter at your meeting on April 10th, there were a couple follow-up items. You eliminated 2 of the 5 repair options. that the town engineer had outlined as possibilities. The two that you eliminated from consideration were the concrete wall with no veneer, which was option 1, and then option 5, which was no rebuilding of the wall, but just grading the slope back. So those two options were eliminated last month. You then asked me to follow up with Mr. Azar.
And I quick,
Sure.
I think we eliminated option 2
Oh, I might have had a typo. Oh, yes, it would be,
with new brick.
you didn't specifically state that, but there was certainly some doubt about it.
Option 3 I thought we had option 3. Now I gotta look.
Yep.
Sorry.
I think I had my numbering wrong. It was option 3. The two other options that you had asked me to get cost estimates for were the construction of a flagstone wall to match the retaining wall located behind the pool bathhouse. And the second new option was a timber wall. You also asked that I reach out to the Garrett Park Swimming Pool Association and the Garrett Park Historic Preservation Committee. So in regard to the flagstone wall option, Mr. Azar said this would be comparable to the concrete wall with new brick veneer. So the estimated cost of the flagstone option would be $19,000. The cost of the timber wall option would be in the range of either $12,600 or $13,500. The variation depends on whether or not there would be some seating incorporated into the timber wall. Just as a reminder, the costs that I just shared with you are only dealing with the wall. They do not reflect total project cost, which would also include, access, demolition, grading, and engineering. Those items, regardless of which wall option you pick, have an associated cost of roughly $10,000. You had also asked me to follow up with the Garrett Park Swimming Pool Association, as well as HPC, as I mentioned. And I noticed that the president of the Garrett Park Swimming Pool Association is, participating virtually, so if she would like to weigh in, but I included the text of her email to me in the agenda packet materials. Basically, she said that, I'll just read it. The general feeling, not unanimous, but definitely consensus of the board, was that the historic nature of the wall was not top of mind for pool members. And so they couldn't see the point in spending the time or money on efforts to excavate or try to recreate something historically accurate. There is no love for the concrete wall or other stones. The two options people are hoping the town will look into are the simple wood retaining wall, not railroad ties, and stonework to match the small wall at the back of the bathhouse, which is the flagstone option we just discussed. We also did receive information from the Garrett Park Historic Preservation Committee. They discussed this at their meeting on May 3rd, included in your agenda packet. Is their statement. In short, their primary recommendation is that the town explore the preservation of the existing wall by obtaining an assessment and recommendation from a qualified historic preservation professional. And there is more detail in their actual statement that is included in your agenda packet. They did state if the foundation wall is not susceptible of preservation, then reconstruction is contemplated in the options currently under discussion by the council may be the only feasible course of action. In that case, the committee recommends option 1 with 2 qualifications. First, that the shape of the replacement wall emulate the curve of the original foundation wall. And second, that the brick veneer include the largest possible number of salvageable bricks from the existing wall. I do note that Mr. Keller, who's is a member of HPC and I know was involved in writing this, is available if you have any questions. Stephen, did you want to go ahead and show whatever information you had?
Share it's just a little bit of background information on what this was. Let's share. I don't use Zoom very much. We usually use Teams. Oh, there it is. It is working.
I did just want to note that I did not realize that Mr. Keller is also a member of the pool board, so he's wearing 2 hats this evening, I believe.
It's just super quick through the first one. There's that, this is the east end of the town that was originally planned in 1891. It was really 1887, 1891. You see an empty lot that's sitting up there. It was empty because that's where the space was for the town. One of the members of the Historic Preservation Committee actually had a copy of this map from 1942. It shows the same lot with the reservoir noted on it.
Where's that
So this is. what's
compared to
labeled.
what is current now?
So about 2/3 of that is on the pool upper deck, and about 1/3 of it is on the old tennis court that's crumbling.
Okay.
And then this space that's in here, there used to be a bridge that went over. I have an aerial of that. There used to be a bridge that went over. Strathmore came up this way, turned that way, went up over a bridge, which now is Manny's Woods. And that bridge was eventually taken away, and that road ran down the hill over here where you see those things. This is the that plan that shows, that's the circle where the tank was. You can see the tennis court sitting on there. That's so you can see that that tank was sitting right in the middle of that lot. This is what it looks like now. So you can kind of see it. It's almost like a little Stonehenge-ish where you can see like the top of it. And then just like you can see part of it where the paving crumbled on the inside of where that tennis court was, and the fence that divides the two lots goes right between the two of it. The thing that was a little bit interesting, I had this map from another project. This is what it looked like in 1937 from an aerial map. So very few houses were there. One of them, I think, is the resident is right here, is Ed Lincoln's house is this one. So that's what it looked like. There's that bridge that went across. And then the thing I think is a little bit interesting is I laid the two photos over each other. And if you do it this way, you can go from what it is now. and
Is
kind
that
of
the
fade it.
curved wall, that white curved thing in front of the reservoir?
Yeah, you see that arc in there.
Yeah.
And then, this is what, going back in time a little bit, kind of how that was there. So I'm pretty sure that this is why I concur with the Historic Preservation Committee that the town owns that land and owns that, what the residue of that tank is. It's not the reservoir. So it's not the pool association that really owns it. It's a town.
Yeah, no, I don't think that was a question.
No, it's not
Yeah.
really, but so value that input, but I think it's good to like think about it as like a town asset. But it looks like what that was originally there was the masonry wall was the inner wall of the tank, and there was probably an earthen berm around it that sloped back. And that's what we have today is they probably, when they built the pool in the 50s, they probably took away that earthen berm on one side and then flattened it out on the other. That's why we have that exposed. And I'm pretty sure that if you look at some of the photos on there, there's really rough looking brick down below. I'm pretty sure that is the original brick. And then the top brick of that is probably where they needed to level it out in the 50s when the pool was built, but that's when that was put on. So that can be important to get a study on that to kind of see what's worth preserving, even though it's not by law required to be preserved. And what are maybe some of the options that could be done with it. I'm not sure that it's terribly important to keep the brick that's on the top and reuse that. It may be more historically valuable to keep what's below, and that could potentially even be buried. Because if you're not destroying it, you could always, some future town government could elect to bring it back. But I think another compelling option to think about is you could do something where it is extending the wooden benches so that you can set up for swimming meets, but then if that bench sits up 1.5 feet or maybe even 2 feet, you could build a retaining wall there and then fill in with earth back to that old retaining wall. Then that would be a lot less pressure on that retaining wall wanting to push out. We may not even need the new concrete wall with all the brick and everything with that. So I think it might be good to have somebody that does this kind of work professionally really take a look at it. Like I used to do it, and colleagues of mine from then still do it, and it might be that's the best solution, I think, to see what they could come up with to kind of not tear it away, but also make it more useful for now. It's my 3 cents on it. So does anybody want to see this anymore before I take this off? Or
So I'm sorry, just to understand, are you you're advocating for none of these, the 5 options right now, but to do further study, or?
I would suggest do a further study to verify somebody poking around for more. Like I looked at it with Lisa for like 7 minutes, and I looked at it with Chris Keller and a couple other people for like 10. Probably get somebody to come out and do like a memo on it,
How
really
deep
poke
is it
around it.
and what is it made of?
Yeah. and take some of the
Okay.
information I had, like with the photos, they probably would either teach us something that I didn't see, or, maybe concur with what that is, and then figure out whether, whether it's good to like keep it exposed on the surface, or maybe you just bury it, maybe you build it into
Mhm.
something else. Maybe you reconstruct it with kind of what it is now. But I think some of those other options, I think it's just really working in offices that did preservation. I don't think we would really entertain any of those.
So I
So-
think, let's look at a big picture question. Is this wall, is this something that we value and want to preserve to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars? Is this something that we could honor in a smaller sense, like with a plaque and with a portion of it? The big question is this important enough
Yeah.
that nobody even knows it's here? Very few people even knew that it was here. Is that something that we want to change, and we want to keep it, and we're willing to spend money to highlight it, and therefore we want it to be visible and do we value this enough that we're going to spend a bunch of money to preserve it? And
That's always
make
a
it,
Question.
I don't want to make the assumption one way or the other.
I know I would like to preserve it. I think
I would like to
Chris would.
preserve it.
But we the only three is a great question.
I
But,
mean, I guess compared to what? Like what else? I mean, if it's
It's just a wall.
$1,000, I guess we could use those in some other way, right?
No, the alternative is to have a functional wall.
Right,
Oh.
right now it's falling.
I see. Yeah.
Yes,
Falling
so
Right.
into the pool.
I see.
And the decision's been made not to do anything until after the pool season's over, so we do have time. If we did want to put somebody to explore what it's made out of underground and report back, but I don't know that I particularly, the historic preservation people didn't really care. The pool board people.
the
didn't
town,
really
the county historic preservation.
Yeah.
Didn't care. What about and the town historic preservation, Nancy Wall's memo?
No.
They just wanted to preserve the curve.
No, they want to
No.
protect, they want to preserve the materials.
We do have a resident comment in the chat. Would you like me to read that? Or
Yes,
not?
please.
Okay. And this is from Donna Caljoun. Absolutely agree. It's a town issue, but we pool board were asked to share our thoughts. If the town wants to spend the money, it's their prerogative. As a resident, not board president, I think we are over engineering, and it's a fair amount of taxpayer money to rebuild the wall that most residents don't even know is there and don't care enough to engage about.
Yeah.
I see it as being the last, as was mentioned by the Town Historic Preservation Committee, as being the last piece of the B&O Railroad that we have that's still intact after the train station was torn down. The old bridge was knocked down, a lot of other things. We've already set aside the money for doing this project. It's been in the budget for a little while now. And yes, maybe take a look at some, have somebody come out and take a look at it, a little more in-depth study who does historic preservation, but it could also be highlighted too. Proper lighting, moving the bushes and so forth and so on. One could highlight it to make it a more prominent feature rather than just trying to hide it as been done in the past.
I agree with Phil.
Okay.
And Stephen.
I still strongly believe there's a way to do both, to kind of get more utility for the pool and not demolish something that is our last physical time, whether it's like Phil says, whether it's highlighted at the surface or not, because could be like another step. And usually to do a survey like that from a preservationist is not much. They can come out for a couple hours and then spend a couple hours writing a memo with photos and give you a pretty good idea, like just for an example.
Dig down to see where and how deep it is down there and what's down there.
Probably not, because it's not like it's structural. They'd probably just look at kind of the things I looked at, like to see like what they think is from the 1870s and what they think is from later. the condition of what's newer versus older, what it would take to kind of restore it. So could ask for, ask for maybe some feedback on some of these recommendations that were given.
So are you wanting to is the goal to see how much of the original material can be used for this particular wall, or to remove it, to put it somewhere else, to commemorate it in a different way? Like, what's the goal in preserving? Like, what is the
Yeah.
preserved thing? Is it the location and what it and what it was?
Yeah.
I want to understand what we're looking for, because it's a different thing if we're wanting to incorporate it into the better structure, an improved structure there.
You lose a
versus-
lot of the story if you move it and try to just keep like an artifact of it. I think it's really your options are to kind of either make something out of it or bury it and then just keep it where it could be recoverable later. That's a big part of preservation is you make changes like to this building, you make something where it could be taken back to its original, even if it's unlikely it's going to happen. And that's what happened with Penn Place. It was a lot of modifications and it was eventually taken back to its original appearance. And that could be the same thing here. Maybe the easiest thing is to kind of have a foot of dirt over it on the top and that comes into a new retaining wall, but as long as there's record of it. 20 years from now, somebody could do the reverse, or maybe decide that that's better to do that plan. I mean, personally, I think it could look really good to have that bench, have the landscaping held in at a higher level behind it, still keep that foundation wall. Maybe you could still tell the story. Maybe even the top of it is not the brick. If it is found that it's not from the original and it's from the 50s when the pool was done, it doesn't necessarily have to look the same as it does now. It just had to be tied in.
Since it seems like everyone's in agreement that we should at least study this further. So maybe can we do that? I mean, how do we agree to do that and then move on in the next?
Yeah.
Okay, so Barb, can you, so I guess the next step in this is going to be, let's hire a preservation, somebody or other that Steve is going to,
And give you some names.
Yeah, I would ask that someone give me some names and actually outline a written scope of work, because I'm still a little unclear about that after listening to the conversation.
So we're trying to get more information about.
That's what it
could be
sounds like.
done to protect this
Correct.
and
I'm
keep it
just-
in place. And
Yeah.
so,
What's the significance of it?
Right, and
Before we.
and
spend
it would need to obviously come back to
Yeah.
you, because this is not a funded project, obviously. So once
Mhm.
we get proposals, it can come back.
Yeah.
Stephen, do you have any estimate of the cost of work? I'm trying to figure out if this is informal quotes or needs to be
I mean,
formally
for that
formally
study.
advertised. Yeah, depending on what we think
Oh,
this is
it'd
going to.
just be a couple $1,000s.
Okay, then it would be
not a
informal
whole lot.
quotes then. Okay.
Probably a day of work. In an office I used to work for, we did this a frame out for MNC PPC where they would have a building somewhere and they would ask us to just go look at it, just give them a real rough idea of what they're looking at. So it would be
Yeah.
just something like that.
okay,
And Barb, do you have those pictures that Steve had? And they might want to see them, those historic pictures that Steve just showed.
I don't have those. No,
Yeah, I
I
can
do
get that
not.
to you.
Barb?
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be important.
okay. Time is 9:34, new business. All right. I want to go first. I want to go first with the summer hiatus, because I feel like I want to just take something off really quick. So as Barb mentioned earlier, Wiedemann, our project managers at Wiedemann, are available to come on the date, which would be our August council meeting. They're available to come and do a presentation. That is typically August is typically when we cancel our meeting. So.
August 10th.
Yeah, I thought I heard 14th, so 10th is the Monday.
No, August 14th.
August 14th.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's July.
So we could keep the August meeting and not cancel the August meeting and schedule Wiedemann for a decent portion of that meeting for us to hear get the presentation on their on the concepts and the work that they've done. If we do that, well, first of all, is everybody available? Is anybody out of town on the 14th and unavailable to participate?
I'm in an airplane to Reykjavik. That time.
Seriously?
I'm serious.
Oh, lucky.
Well, not quite. Well, I'll be at the airport.
All right. Well, we're not going to be deciding anything. This is going to be receiving the presentation. So for
Yeah.
what that's worth, it's just the beginning. That's sort of the first phase of the discussions about how to proceed on town hall. I mean, this is the
Yeah.
very, this is the
I'd
very,
hate to miss that though. Is there a way to, I guess it would be receiving by email, but then you're talking about doing a presentation.
they would be present with us.
Yeah, so it'd be a shame for me to miss
Yeah.
that if people are, can they do it a little bit earlier or a little bit after? It
Well,
might
does
also
anybody
be-
else? Are we dealing with one schedule that we need to accommodate? Or are we dealing with multiple schedules? I'm in town, my
I'm in
kids,
town.
At this point, I'm in town.
I'm in town.
14th of August.
Jerry, are you,
I'm in
town?
town.
You said yes?
But I'm also, I'm in town, but I'm also open to a flexible date if that works for others.
Okay. My concern with not having Wiedemann present to us
Mhm.
in early August or in mid-August, not necessarily that date,
Mhm.
but my concern is that if they give us the report and then we don't schedule an opportunity for a public presentation of it, you know,
Mhm.
we're all eager to move on to the next phase, you know, to start that process of evaluating the options.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, I guess on the outside, I definitely don't want it to go into September.
Mhm.
So if
No.
we don't want to do it on the 14th, we could have a special meeting instead.
Instead of a council meeting, yeah, I'd
Instead of a council
appreciate it
meeting.
if we could, and it might be very doable for Wiedemann to do it a little bit earlier than the final, like do it almost like a pre-final where if they're amenable to it, to get their concept work together, and they might be crossing Ts and dotting Is on their final report still, but they might have that design work done in advance, and that's what we're going to be presenting to the public. I personally would be digging into all the details on like the siding and the roofing and the structure, but I'm not sure most residents are gonna, other than a handful of us in town, not many residents are gonna dig into that.
When are you away, Steve?
I leave on the 14th and I am back on the 23rd, but I'm going to be exhausted. So
How about the 7th?
the 24th, I'll be back.
So the week of the 7th, would that work for anybody?
Well, I need to double check the date, but the 14th was very soon after their contractual completion date. So I don't know that the town can unilaterally move up their contractual completion date.
Hmm.
That's
And you
that's
don't-
the
And you
issue.
think that would,
But it wouldn't be
that
their
asking
completion
them
date.
to present it to us prior to that date,
I'd have to ask them. I don't want to.
I won't be available, I can tell you that.
you will not?
Nope.
7th.
7th, no.
The 7th week or the 7th day?
Most of that week, because I don't get back from vacation until probably
Okay.
the 10th.
Thursday. Okay, maybe
Okay,
the
so
the 11th, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
Friday night?
Yeah.
Just to comment on that contract too, like I wouldn't suggest that they end their whole contract early, but it's not uncommon to do like that kind of a presentation a little bit ahead. Like I can think of a couple projects at least where I've done it, and one of them was just here in Montgomery County where we presented to Kensington Town, and I think our final report went out like a month later. So
All right,
I think it would be
Um,
okay.
I'm here.
okay. Well, dang it, I was thinking this is gonna be a quick and easy, quick and dirty thing.
Maybe we
Um,
can do a calendar and see.
Or maybe later in the month. Because then it might be good to get it and then everybody digest it.
All right.
Wait until the,
Good. So the 7th, did we say? No.
No.
Phil,
Okay, all right. So it doesn't sound like at the moment there that we can make an easy decision on this. I mean, I think in that case, if we're not going to have a council meeting on the sort of charter designated day that we're gonna have the council meeting, that we can cancel that, and we can always have a special meeting a different day,
on the 11th.
or I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we, well, I don't want to pick a date right this second.
Okay.
So Barb, if we aren't going to meet on the day that we are typically expected to, the second Monday of the month, do we just cancel this? And if we find a date later in August or something, do we just come up with, we have a special meeting?
Yeah, that's up to you all. I think that's how we did it last August when you had the special town council meeting on the
On the
31st to talk about the town office renovation and town
Yeah.
hall.
Okay,
It
well,
makes sense to
so,
do a doodle maybe, and then if all fails and there's no real good time for everyone else, I'll just miss the 14th.
Yeah. it's-
okay.
So is the August 14th meeting then canceled? Is that correct? Or not?
Or do you want to wait and see what the doodle shows?
But it doesn't sound like the 14th is going to work.
Oh.
So.
Not for Wiedemann, I guess. The question is, are you planning to hold a meeting?
Do we want to?
Do you want to meet? Is there any other reason for you all to meet on the
I'm sorry?
14th or not?
I,
Or is that still under consideration?
I don't know.
Okay, that's fine.
Let's find out
Well-
schedules and find out if Wiedemann would be open to doing it prior to the completion dates. And we'll talk.
Okay.
So we're not doing anything except gathering more information.
We've been
That's
doing
what we do
that.
here.
Okay. All right, well, then. Kayla, do you want to go next with the update of the town procurement procedures? I would like to, the big picture on this is that we do not have a formal codified, I don't know if that's the right word,
Codified is
procurement policy. It's only been an informal memo. And so we are wanting to make this more formal. And this is the very first attempt at it, not attempt, but Kayla's come with some ideas for direction. This is not for us to make any decision, but just, is she on the right path in making this policy what we want it to be?
So Mayor Welch touched on a couple of the big pictures, but just to give some history that is contained in your memo. This guideline for procurement originated back in 2002. It was last updated in 2003. We don't have any updates since. With it being only a policy, it's not quite as rigidly enforceable as it would be if it was codified. Generally, procurement is codified, periodically reviewed for the dollar figures if they are named. And generally, it goes into more detail than what we currently have. You do have the current procurement guidelines as an attachment to the memo. As you can see, it's a page front and back. It's very loose and flexible, which I am sure at times has served the community well. But as mentioned in the memo, we do have several upcoming projects where we will be bidding things out, where we will have potential situations that we do not address. And so now we kind of have a golden window of, we know we're going to need it. One of the things that I don't think was touched on earlier in the ARPA conversation, but that I do think bears bringing up is we are required to not only spend ARPA funds in accordance with federal contracting policy, but we also have to be compliant with our own procurement guidelines. So as we prepare to start spending the serious portion of those funds, it would be a good time to make sure that we have a procurement code, not just a procurement guideline that addresses what we need it to be. If you look at the back page of the memo, you'll see that there are a couple of bullet points where at this point, I would like council to kind of give me their temperature, their take, whatever you want to call it, of if you think those dollar values hold weight, if there's something you can go up to, or if there's a desire to keep the dollar figures the same. I will reiterate, these are 2003 dollar figures. As much as I would love for us to be able to purchase at 2003 prices, that is not on the table for us. So kind of going bullet by bullet. At this point, the threshold for informal voice quotes is anything that is less than $25,000.
I would propose 10 grand myself.
So you would like to drop it down?
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Max has spoken. Are there any other council members who would like to see it go down? Or do most people prefer to see it hold steady?
I would agree with down.
If it goes down, that requires the additional,
That requires
Approval.
bidding, that requires it go out on eMaryland Marketplace Advantage, that does add significant timeline alterations.
right?
So if that is what council desires, we can obviously incorporate that, but council should move forward knowing that it will add oftentimes several weeks
Well,
to a project.
let me clarify something for a moment or ask clarifying question. It says threshold for informal voice quotes. Are those always followed up by a written quote? Or how does all that work?
So I can only speak to my own experience. When I come to council with a quote, I almost always have it in writing, even if it is not a formal bid. When we brought the camera quote to council, that was in writing. It was technically under the informal voice quote threshold, but I will readily admit I'm a documentation person. I like it in writing. I won't say I want it in triplicate, but I want it in writing. I want it acknowledged. If you have seen a quote come from me, there is a written quote that it is based on. I know Barb is similar.
You know, and I think there was a nuance, which isn't specifically addressed in our code with the EAA contract. That was what was referred to as a piggyback. We're piggybacking on someone else's competitively bid contract. It says informal voice, but typically what it means is you're not issuing a formal bid package. You're not advertising on Emma. It's not on the town website. So it's a voice quote, but typically they are, as Kayla said, reduced to writing. It's just not going through the formal drafting of an RFP or an RFB.
I mean, could we just for clarification say informal quote? Is just it's the voice part that bothers me and
We
Sounds
can
like a town crier coming through the streets, but
hey, what do you give me for this? You know?
yeah.
I'm
a
not an
writ-
auctioneer.
Could we say a written quote instead of voice quote?
Informal written quote.
We
Yeah.
can call it an informal written quote. That is
It'll work.
one of the things we do. Circling
Okay.
back to the original question. Councilmember Max and Councilmember Schultz have said that they would prefer to see that go down to anything below 10,000. I do want to point out as well that the threshold for council approval is currently at $10,000.
Right.
Is there also a desire to keep that at 10,000?
Wonder if that's
I
the
mean,
confusing part. like,
Maybe
well,
we
it's
could
not-
just let it go a little higher. I mean, just because it gives us more wiggle room should we need it without having to go through the bureaucratic process, which sounds like several months. Is it several months?
Yeah. Yeah, if I may, I would encourage you all to think about this is the staff time, not only the dollar threshold, but the staff time involved. Writing a formal bid with all the kind of contractual stuff around it is very time consuming. So if this is how, I mean, it's up to you all, but if that's how you want staff spending their time, just recognize that is part of the decision you're making by lowering the amount.
But that's going out to the marketplace, right? Versus.
It's basically, you can go out there and look at Yendel, you could look at Town Hall. Essentially, you may not have as many attachments. The Yendel bid is 355 pages, for example, but that is what essentially that construct of an RFB for Yendel for Town Hall is what you are asking us to do for anything over that we anticipate being over $10,000.
So it's going to add probably 6 weeks minimum, right? Because you got to have the time that it's posted is whatever, 30 days plus.
It's the time it's posted. It's also the staff time in writing it.
Right.
And what is, I mean, how often do you go above 25,000 in a year? It seems like it's not that often, right?
It
10,000
quite frankly
more.
depends on the year.
Right. of
So
course.
this year we have several large scale projects. We also have unexpected events, like none of us expected the slide to be damaged. None of us expected.
Right, the slide would have to go if it was down to 10, and then it would be 6 weeks of processing and staff
Yeah.
time for the slide. I mean, it's a nice slide, but
And it'd also be, you know,
we don't need that.
I mean, there are a lot of things that this would affect.
Yeah,
So
We get 3 written quotes at anything
That's a
over
good idea.
$10,000. And then the the council has to approve it before it's spent.
mhm,
That's fine with me.
okay.
I'll agree with that.
good middle ground, no bureaucracy.
I didn't follow that, but as long as Kaylee does, it's okay with
Yeah, I
me.
didn't.
So
Well,
I'm just going to repeat it because one of the ways I was taught to demonstrate understanding of a concept was to repeat it. At this point, the desire for written informal quotes, which are, I go directly to a vendor and say,
How
what would
much?
it cost to do X? If I can provide 3 of those to council for anything over $10,000, council can then approve whichever they so desire
Without a formal RFP.
without a formal RFP, so that we try and maintain a balance of appropriate research, but also timeliness for matters.
And given that this threshold of 25,000 was from 2003, can we raise that since we
It
are
is
going to
Yeah.
have an informal process for under this amount? Can
council,
we raise that? Can we double it to 50,000 and then?
it
have the
is
informal
up to
process?
council's comfort level. If council is comfortable with raising the threshold for formal written bids to 50,000, which is what you're suggesting with doubling it, that is simply a direction you need to give. Please have the documents incorporate a threshold of 50,000.
Do we check their current insurance?
So we do require any vendor provide their certificate of insurance. One of the things that we have been doing as we work through some of the received bids and making sure I'm contacting vendors for the Yendel project is I am also looking at their status with the Maryland State Agency on taxing, just to see that they're in good standing. We generally don't want to be hiring a vendor who had their business dissolve because they were not paying the appropriate taxes. That's not where we want public funds going. So
Well, so it's a very different question whether we want to lower it to 10 or double it to 50.
my understanding is the lowering it to 10 was for the informal written quotes.
Correct.
And that we have put that to bed. It sounds like the consensus is they would like informal written quotes
From
be
10
re-
to 50.
from 10 to whatever the threshold is for
Yeah.
bids. The question is now, what is our threshold where we say we absolutely have to go out to bid? It is currently
RFP.
$25,000. Councilmember Eisenstadt has suggested the idea of doubling it to $50,000.
How do you feel about that?
When I look at some of the projects we have, I would prefer to see it at least 40,000. If council's comfortable with 50,000, I think that is fine and appropriate.
But we'd still have the right to approve it.
You would always have the right to
Above
approve it.
10.
Anything above 10
Right.
would come before council for approval. There is always language in the RFPs that states that council may at its discretion refuse to award to anybody.
Right.
It may award only part. It may choose to go out and rebid and everyone else is just gonna have to deal with it. There is generally very, I'll call it protective language to preserve council's ability to make any choice. And that is part of why it takes so much time to pull together an RFP. Because it's not just staff time writing it. It's at times for the more complex project, consulting with the arborist or potentially sending the RFP for legal review with the town attorney. Yandel, as Barb mentioned, is a 355-page document
Tear down a house.
to tear down a house, to protect the trees that are on the property, to make sure that the environmental hazards, including asbestos, are appropriately dealt with.
Okay.
That takes some time to make sure we cover all the bases. So my question for council, and this can be a thumbs up, thumbs down. Are you comfortable with the idea of a $50,000? Anything above that has to be put out on eMaryland Marketplace Advantage, has to be on the website, has to receive formal sealed bids.
Well, when coupled with the 10,000 to 50,000 informal approval by the council. Written.
Quote.
Written,
Written quote, yeah.
informal, but written,
Correct.
3 bids.
Right.
Sounds like the town office would handle anything under 10. It may just be able to
Yeah.
mention it in a report. And then if it's between 10 and 50, it would be a written
Quote.
summary the next time.
Right.
And then over 50 would be a full marketplace, full RFP.
Correct.
I'm in favor of that.
I mean,
Barb, so by dropping it to 10.
We're leaving it at 10.
Are you talking about the threshold to come to council?
Yeah.
I mean, what I was just saying to Kayla is if it's not a formal advertised bid, then it has to be something else. And typically that's either going to be, and the thresholds are going to match up. So just as one is less than 25,000 now, it would be over 25,000. And, I think Kayla's going to get to this. I'm sure she was expecting to. Then you have like cooperative procurement or rider contracts, which are with when another governmental entity has already competitively bid something. And I would say for small jurisdictions, and I would say we tried to do this in Westminster and they were a city of 20,000. You do look for other people who've already done the work for you.
So we sub essentially.
Yeah, essentially you write another contract. There's also joint governmental purchasing alliances that exist. So I think Kayla's tracking this. I was just saying to her, I'm not sure I am, but if it's not a formal quote, then inherently it's either informal or it's something else. And so whatever that number is, they kind of need to work together. Is that right?
So by changing these numbers, aside from adding time to how long it takes to make a decision because having to go to the bid process, is there anything, are we tying your hands, staff, by changing these numbers and making it more difficult to do routine things that don't rise to the level of a necessary, appropriate for council to weigh in on?
By changing, we're making it easier, right?
If council could give me about 30 seconds to try and collect and articulate my thought.
Sorry.
One thing while she's thinking, I will say is that just to run the numbers for the fun of it. So $50,000 represents approximately 4% of our annual budget. So it's, I mean, if we fell flat on our face, it's a 4% hit, which we don't expect it, but I'm just saying, if you want to look at it in terms of percentage of budget, that's where we're crippled.
Is that manageable or not manageable to you?
To me, I think it's very manageable.
Okay.
Was another sidebar thought on it too. Like, I wonder if we do need to drop like the council approval versus like recording of the results to council. Like, say it is something like the slide. Do we really need to have that come out to vote on it versus town office getting 3 bids and then coming in back in the manager report next time? We got bids ranging A to B and C, and B was picked for whatever reason, which I think we've done on a fair amount of contracts. And then another side thought to that is, I think my first year on council, if my memory is correct, that the manager report had everything that was expended that month. I think it personally went too far. Like, it was showing like salaries, which was ridiculous. But like, I think anything's like spent in maybe that solves it, is like that the town office had to spend on these 7 things and, show them in the threshold. There were a lot of things that were spent in more recent years that we didn't know about.
Yeah, I mean,
I wonder if there's a middle ground on that.
Yeah, I would say it's run the gamut. I can think back, I've been at this now for 37 years, and I can think back to one of my earliest cities I worked in, where literally we printed out an accounts payable register, which was just ludicrous in my opinion. But I had one council member whose practice was to pick the, $50 item and ignore something that was $50,000. So I think it can be distracting. I mean, I think it's whatever level of detail you all feel you need to, perform your duties as a council member. Circling back around, Stephen, in Westminster, we raised the threshold, and I've seen other jurisdictions do this, and it has to be your comfort level, especially larger jurisdictions that do a lot more purchasing. They raised the threshold in Westminster during my tenure of what was the dollar amount that required council approval. But with that, there was also a requirement to include something in, we called it our departmental reports. So it was reported out if something, basically hit a certain threshold level. So I've seen this sliced and diced any which way. It has to be the level that you all are comfortable with.
So what about leaving the $10,000 informal written three informal bids, moving the threshold for required RFPs to $50,000, right? That's, in other words, doubling. I mean, that's the proposal that was the one that we originally had. I guess I'm wary of reducing the amount. I think Steve is suggesting reducing the council approval requirement, right? In other words, over 5,000, or is that what you're suggesting?
I was wondering if maybe the other way, maybe if there is something we know is kind of coming and that we don't necessarily need, we just need to know the result that,
right.
Like, the new roof on this building was like $18,000. Like, we didn't necessarily need to vote on the contract.
Okay, agreed.
But if we know maybe if there is a reasonable threshold in there to kind of know that town office did due diligence. They didn't just go with one bid, but they got three
So-
bids and then they reported it later that
Right.
they're all the same thing. It's three different companies.
Move it to 20,000 then. Maybe.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Maybe make that 20,000
Okay,
and
perfect.
then 50 for
30.
full bid.
No, 20,000.
I appreciate our wonderful auctioneer who has joined us for his first meeting and has gotten right into the thick of it. One of the things Town Manager Matthews and I have talked about is it sounds like there is some back and forth and some potential questions about staff impact. That's a little more in depth than we were prepared to go tonight. As you might recall, I said this was just kind of your thumbs up, thumbs down temperature taking. I think I have kind of some broad thoughts collected from the council conversation tonight. I think at this point, we do still have a little time. We don't have to decide tonight. If council is comfortable with it, I would like to come back to you in June with potentially some adjustments based on this conversation. That way everyone has had, a month to kind of kick it over. If they have follow-up questions, they can think about it and send that over to me. And that way we can hopefully nail things down in June with a bit more clarity and a lot more comfort with whatever direction council moves. Is that something we can all?
Sounds good to me.
Works for me.
Okay, then I will hand the mic back over to Barb, who's
Had
been
one other
very
question.
gracious and patient as we.
Steve, you had a question?
Super quick about it. Should this be in the ordinance? I wonder why it's not. And would it be
I-
simpler if we had it? I mean,
It should be an ordinance. It should be codified.
Okay.
As for why it is not, I imagine at one point it was probably a document in development. And sometimes people will choose not to codify because that allows for flexibility with edits and alterations without the cost of doing an ordinance, both in staff time and then in the actual advertising and bringing it into the code. Generally, when it comes to money, I like to err on the side of being stricter.
Mhm.
Some communities, and Barb might be able to speak to this more, some communities will sometimes say, these thresholds are currently set at X, but council may in the future alter them via resolution. I personally don't always like that. I like to keep ordinance with ordinance. I like to keep it the same level of strictness, but that is something I can look into of why it might not have been codified, but that can come back in June.
Okay, that'd be good.
But we definitely want it to be more formal than it is
Yeah.
now.
It's going to be codified.
Yeah, I would say,
There's the kind of base, we'll call it parameters.
Yes.
Barb and I will work with our town attorney to formalize the language, and then that will make the text of the ordinance. No one's voting on an ordinance next.
no.
Good, but we're not that good.
Yeah, I would say I've worked for over half a dozen jurisdictions in 37 years, and this is the first place I've ever been where the procurement code is not codified. So for whatever the context is of why the town handled it the way they did, I can't speak to that, but it's highly unusual not to have a codified procurement practice.
Time is 10:04. Barb, the Waverly Sidewalk Replacement Project. This is brought up as new business, not because we're taking action today, but just to bring us up to date of where we are and to ask a couple of questions so that we can give direction to our engineer so that we can sort of start to move things forward.
What project is it?
This is the Waverly Sidewalk.
Okay.
Right, and I can tag team this with Phil if he's willing, so.
Sure.
Just by way of background, when I made the presentation concerning the introduction of the FY 2024 budget proposal, everyone but Todd, who wasn't with us at that time, may recall that I made some comments regarding the replacement of the section of the Waverly sidewalk from Montrose to Penn Place. As I noted at that time, the sidewalk is in poor condition. I recommended that we proceed with the project during FY 2024, and there is sufficient funding in the capital budget to do so. My recommendation back in March was that there were certain elements of the project design that needed to be finalized, not necessarily, this evening, but certainly within the next few months so that Clark Azar could resume work on the bid package And then with the goal of bidding out the project in early calendar year 2024 and construction to start in the spring of 2024. As I noted in the background materials for you back in the fall of 2022, the Arboretum Committee, and I noticed there's at least one member here, and the chair of the Arboretum Committee is participating virtually. They had some questions about the sidewalk replacement project, expressed interest in a number of areas, and also had some recommendations. And I'll just outline those quickly. And I'll paraphrase. If possible, the Arboretum Committee recommended that we follow the guidelines set forth in the comprehensive Arboretum Plan, which specifies a minimum 5-foot planting strip where feasible. The goal was to allow room for the planting of new trees. I know I had shared this information with the mayor and with Councilmember Bennett, who is the liaison to the Arboretum Committee, and with Councilmember Schulp, who is always instrumental in our infrastructure projects. So the preliminary sidewalk design, which has been on hold since the fall, called for a 4-foot wide sidewalk, which would provide a minimum of a 6-foot planting strip. The Arboretum Committee also asked that I convey to the engineer that the large trees, this is based on Phil Normandy's comments, that the large trees would not survive the sidewalk replacement construction project, so the design did not have to accommodate them. New trees would need to be planted, obviously. I just had a side comment in the background memo is that Mr. Azar recommended that the town contract directly for the removal and planting of trees to avoid any markup from the sidewalk contractor. And I would note that this was also Mr. Normandy's preferred approach of how to handle things. We've also had some discussion of adding lighting to the sidewalk project. This was something that was already in discussion prior to last fall. Similarly to the planting of trees, Mr. Azar recommended that the project design include installation of conduit to enable the future installation of a light fixture or fixtures near Penn Place on that block. Town is envisioned that it would contract directly for the electrical work associated with the fixture installation. The Arboretum Committee also wanted to make sure if the sidewalk was to be moved closer to the slope, that there would be some kind of retaining wall or other kind of stabilizing measure. The preliminary design as it exists today does not call for the sidewalk to be moved closer to the slope. If the sidewalk were to be moved closer to the slope than exists today, certainly a retaining wall would be needed to keep it stabilized. The Arboretum Committee also recommended that the sidewalk, which is currently 4 feet, would be expanded to 5 feet wide, noting the amount of pedestrian traffic that occurs in this block. Clark Azar basically responded that the sidewalk can be expanded to 5 feet and still maintain the minimum 5 feet of green space between the curb and the sidewalk. Some of you who are more tenured on the council, and certainly this predates my time with Garrett Park. When we were doing the Safe Routes to School project, the town actually requested a waiver from SHA standards, which are for 5 feet. So Mr. Azar, assuming that since the town sought a waiver from the state during the Safe Routes to School project, I think it was a reasonable assumption on his part that the town might indeed want a 4-foot sidewalk. I would note that the federal ADA standard is 4 feet. And certainly there'd be some incremental cost difference between a 5-foot sidewalk and a 4-foot one.
What's there now?
4 feet, 4 feet.
Okay.
And I think the Arboretum Committee obviously noted there's, pretty heavy traffic between people coming back and forth to the post office, et cetera. The Arboretum Committee also mentioned that they wanted the sidewalk designed, as we all would, to reduce erosion and runoff. So one of the comments from the engineer was that moving the sidewalk closer to the curb would be beneficial as far as erosion and runoff. He also noted, however, that going from a 4-foot sidewalk to a 5-foot sidewalk would obviously negatively impact runoff. So I think there's a little bit of a tension there between wanting a wider sidewalk and wanting to reduce runoff, just from an engineering standpoint. I think there's also been discussion about planting ground cover to provide a stable slope. Once again, if that's something we would do, that the town would contract for that directly. One of the things, I think everyone on the council probably knows this, but a considerable portion of the park property is not owned by the town. So I would certainly say, as we address erosion issues, if those erosion issues are on the part of the property that is owned by Park and Planning, I think it would be reasonable for us to convey that concern to Park and Planning and ask them to deal with their own erosion issues rather than taking on someone else's responsibility. The Arboretum Committee also asked whether the design included curb and gutters. The preliminary design does include the addition of vertical curb and gutter. So those were some of the considerations back from the fall of 2022. Some other design considerations one came up more recently. Was the Arboretum Committee brought forward the suggestion that the sidewalk follow kind of a gentle curved path rather than a strictly linear one. And discussing this matter with Mr. Azar, he indicated this would be consistent with how the sidewalks were designed north of Strathmore. During the Safe Routes to School projects, there were gentle curved streets without uniform green strips. And Mr. Azar did not believe there would be any cost impact from implementing that suggestion. Another design consideration, this actually came up internally from George Miller of our maintenance staff. He had suggested to me that we consider installing a railing on the slope side of the sidewalk. I discussed that with Mr. Azar. He also agreed that would probably be a good idea, just given the steepness of the slope. It would add about $12,500 to the project. So
The thought about, could we do a row of hedges, like evergreen hedges, that would be a buffer, but not a railing as an alternative?
So but that wouldn't be part of this construction. That would not be the engineering
Will be planted.
solution. That would be something
Well,
after.
it would be in lieu of a railing, is what I'm saying, a row of.
Bill,
green evergreen-
That if we're gonna apply, not with ADA, I mean, I suppose we could do it. One of the things Jason and I had discussed was putting a 6-inch curb on the east side of on the slope side, which you thought we could probably get away with. I suppose you could put a 6-inch curb and then put hedges up.
Yeah.
If you
I
want
just
to
think
not have a
railings-
railing.
So we've also, that area, for better or for worse, has traditionally been used as sledding, and adding
Correct.
this stuff would prevent that. So to the extent that that should be taken into consideration.
yes,
See the 6-inch curb, you can look at it on the Montrose side. That's exactly how it was done, because the engineers were concerned that it would dip like the one on Waverly. So they put in it's like a turn down with a curb on it on that side.
Yeah.
So that would be consistent with something that's adjacent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it because it's adjacent, but just to get a picture of how that might look. That's why they did that. And the other thing is, with ADA, you're trying to keep wheels from falling over the edge. So if you have a curb, you can do that that way, but you don't necessarily need a rail or a curb. There are other ways to do it. And kind of, Joanna's reminded me of the other thing. It is used informally for sledding. I think we also use it really once a year, but it could be used more than that for July 4th, where a lot of people sit on it. So I've seen it a lot of times successfully done in parks, and we're planning it for Kensington. It wasn't built yet, but you could do something where you have the sidewalk end, and it could come out a certain amount of distance, and then it rolls down to maybe the first terrace, so you can't fall very far, and then it rolls down to another terrace. That way it would help that shed rainwater. I'd also be able to have people sit out there on 4th of July, kind of facing the tennis court and so on and so forth.
So-
And then also, if you do like a wider sidewalk, it could even be wider than 5, because a lot of people might want to sit there, and then you could make that more like a promenade, like a park edge, instead of just a sidewalk.
So I think that this is moving beyond the
Yeah.
scope of what we're asking.
Yeah.
Come and check in my room. I had a bunch.
We lost.
Sorry, Jerry.
I'm
Lost her
sorry.
mic.
No, it was just my mic. Sorry.
Okay. In terms of a terrace or building a hedge or any of that stuff, none of that would be precluded by this project that we are that we're talking about, this work that we're trying to contract. You're trying to get this work.
Be details of it, really. right?
It would be, yeah, it would be a detail. I don't see where it precluded, but if you put it, I think a 6-inch curb would probably help it versus going into a full railing, because of the railing, you'd have to take it out if you're gonna try and do some terracing or whatever. I think versus a 6-inch curb, you might be able to still use that as something to sit on.
So it'd be on the hillside of the
Correct.
sidewalk?
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, and if it helps, I could sketch it up between now and the next meeting, kind of what I'm talking about with the terracing and all. It would be a bigger project that maybe could be done part A and B, but I think it would get a lot more use out of that park than just having a sidewalk.
So I appreciate the idea of a second part to this. I think one of the things I've talked with Barb a bunch about is what can we do to improve this sidewalk to make it safer and less bumpy without hindering a part B?
Mhm.
I don't want to take up a part B right now.
Yeah, it could definitely be
So,
cleared off.
so I mean, as long as,
Mhm.
as long as a future part B is not harmed or is not shut off, I want to get as much done of this sidewalk.
Yeah,
So,
we can bid the details.
so it sounds like the railing is a no-go. So do we thumbs up, thumbs down on the railing?
No railing.
No
No
railing?
railing.
Jerry? Railing, no railing?
No railing.
No railing, unanimous.
But I'm gonna go with a 6-inch curb. I think we need to put the 6-inch curb in though.
That would be thumbs down on the curb. I don't know that we need it.
Okay, is the curb a required piece? I mean, I guess if that's curb, that's concrete pavement, whatever the material is. Just forgive me for not knowing at the moment, but you, by doing that now, we would be taking advantage of having the infrastructure for putting that material in.
And it
And
would,
so it would,
I guess that makes it hard to
Yeah.
do A and B. I think if you're gonna do A and then stop it like it is on Montrose and just put ivy or whatever.
Yeah, I think the
Stuff is over
thinking,
there.
and Phil, feel free to, I know in talking to George and then following up with Jason, I think the concern is someone with a stroller going a little off the sidewalk. It is an extremely steep slope.
Mhm.
So whether it's a curb or it's a railing, the idea was something to stop someone from going down the
Going down
hill,
the
which
side.
I think from a safety standpoint, something is warranted. I don't have a particular thought on what that should be, whether that's a curb or a railing, but I think there
Yeah.
should be something.
Guess you could just do the curb, because even if you do a plan B later that has a terrace, that top terrace could come up the top of the curb that could still work. So
all right, so 6-inch curb, is this thumbs up, thumbs down?
Looks like Jerry.
I'm 6-inch curb.
All right,
I mean, I'm kind of with Steven on that. It seems like that might be something that's hard to then work around later, but I admit I don't have a great sense of best here.
I think we need something because, as Barb mentioned earlier, and Jason and I had talked about, we need something to prevent wheeled toys, vehicles, people from wandering off the side, because there's not gonna be much to stop you before you go down that hill.
yeah, but if you do a plan B, then you don't need it. So then you're kind of like stuck with it. So maybe it does make sense for me to just distribute the sketch. If there's a lot of interest in it, we could carry it forward. If there's no interest, we'll just go with a curve maybe.
the width of the sidewalk. So if we have a 4-foot sidewalk, then we'll have a 6-foot planting area. If we have a 5-foot sidewalk, we'll have a 5-foot area. Steve, you said something about having even wider than 5 feet.
And maybe I said that incorrectly, because maybe it would look too big if it was much wider all the way down, but thinking if there's a way to get some places where maybe it scoops out and you can get a bench there. So people could look out one way or the other, or sometimes you can do a backless bench, that way you could face the sidewalk or face out. As I think a lot of people go through there and we just don't really use that park, that whole slope. We really just use it like once or twice a year.
I
it
think if
could
I may,
be more
Phil,
useful.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think every discussion we've had, if the sidewalk moves at all closer to the slope, then we're looking at retaining wall.
Yep.
That was my recollection.
I think we're gonna need a retaining wall regardless, because we needed it on Montrose and that slope was
I don't think so.
harder on Waverly.
No, we
Jason
don't.
says we
We do
shouldn't
not.
need it as long as we keep the edge of the slope edge of the sidewalk
is.
where it is.
But that reminds me of another issue, is what happened on that slope is the street is up high, the curb comes up above that. And the reason why those trees, it's not necessarily just the construction of it that really puts those trees in the kind of the replacement category. And I'm kind of pleased to hear that the town for once is considering like the long range on the trees versus protect every tree at all costs versus having good trees for 15 years from now. What happened on that slope is all that the space between the sidewalk and the curb, it all eroded. So that dropped down, that sidewalk dropped down probably a good foot. And that's also why it was tipping over. So if you put another sidewalk back in down there without a retaining wall, I think it's going to just keep doing the same thing. And it's also not necessarily the safest we could offer for probably the most frequently used parallel parking in town, including a lot of people that are older and a lot of people are from out of town. If you're asking them to get out there, I think it would be much better to like get a retaining wall done, bring that sidewalk up to the level of the curb and make a flatter way to walk through it versus right now you have to walk down a foot of slope and you have to walk across the roots. If we're going to be trying to avoid people walking on the plants, I think it could be the simpler way, kind of have some connections where you can get through to that sidewalk and get
Was this
down.
decided before or are we
We've been
set?
working
No.
on it for a long time. We haven't
No.
made any decision.
Okay.
So, okay, so do we want to, Steve, it sounds like you've got a lot of different, aspects of this that you think we should consider different from what we have in front of us.
I explained them all probably 4 or 5 years ago. I just haven't
Right.
seen the plans since
I
then.
haven't- Right,
And I
so.
really wasn't privy to a lot of stuff that was happening.
So we're trying to bring, that's part of the reason for this discussion today is to sort of bring the conversation level.
Mhm.
So, aside from the no railing, do we want to decide on the width of the sidewalk or do we want to wait and see what other ideas are out there and come back with, Steve, do you want, I mean, are we asking to have you represent what you did several years ago, before we make another decision or what do we?
Wasn't the idea on the table it was scoped to sort of do what was, I guess I'm not understanding. I mean, we're reopening this much more broadly now, right?
Mhm.
And I guess that's okay, but I wondered if we couldn't, I mean, initially you conveyed that you wanted to sort of have it a narrower project or plan A, or I think that's a good idea to just go forward with. It seems like we're incurring a lot of additional costs and planning. I don't know.
Okay. I like being able to not do anything double. So if a plan B, if there's something different that we want to think about this space in the future, because it's kind of an entrance to town, I don't want to do anything with this sidewalk that will preclude that. So
Okay.
if we have a small consideration of a plan B concept, or not concept so much as just, let's make sure that we're not doing anything that will make further development harder.
Mhm.
That's okay with me. I mean, that's part of, it's a big piece why I kind of pulled this back was to try to decide. And it seemed that there was interest in moving forward with what we have, which is, or not what we have, but with this narrow scope.
I like the idea of it curving rather than being linear, which
Mhm.
was one of the design options that you had, Barb.
One of the things to keep in mind is we only have about a third of this sidewalk, which we actually own. I mean, depending on what we want to do with it, I'm sure we could probably get away with doing some curves and stuff like that, as long as we hit the landings or the entries to the stairways that go down to the courts.
Did you say curves with a V or
Curve.
curves with a B?
Curving,
Road-
serpentine.
Yeah,
We can serpentine or go back and forth. I think we could probably get away with that, but we have to keep in mind that actually we don't own some of that property. When we say we're going to replace this thing, it's pretty easy because we're just going to replace it because it needs safety, it needs to whatever, we can replace it. And I think that's acceptable. But when we start to go into deeper plans, especially along some of the slope area, we have to be careful because we don't actually own it. And we're going to have to go to the county and say, are you okay with us changing where the sidewalk is, how it looks, blah, blah, blah. Versus saying we're going to replace it in kind. Maybe we'll do a little serpentine sort of thingy to make it look nice. And so on. So I think we need to temper this with that.
so I guess the question then is, do we want this to be bigger than just replacing the sidewalk? Do we want to set the stage for something else? And therefore we need to jump through more hoops now, like getting county permission to serpentine, whatever the verb is on that, this sidewalk so that it is in place for a future Plan B.
I don't think it would be that hard for MNC PPC on this. And I talked to Jason Azar about that like 3, 4, 5 years ago, that there was, he thought there was literally zero chance that they would find the funding to participate. But if we were doing something that maybe affected their park and it was on our dime, shouldn't be that hard for them to say it's okay if it's not adversely affecting everything else. I don't think it would be a big hang up for them.
So-
We could have been both wrong, Jason and I, but we didn't think so
So-
when we talked about it.
We came into this discussion wanting to just ask 2 questions and then move forward. So do we want to just answer those 2 questions and move forward? Or do we want to say that we're not ready to answer these questions because we want more information?
What are the 2 questions?
Whether to increase the width of the sidewalk from 4 foot to 5 foot, and we already decided about the railing.
Yeah,
I'd
like
like-
5 foot makes
I'd
sense.
like to
Yeah.
go to 5 feet.
Yeah.
All those in
Okay.
favor of the 5 foot, a thumbs up, 5 feet?
5 feet.
Everybody says 5 feet.
Yeah.
Okay. So are we coming up with more design parameters, more suggestions? Or are we just going with those narrow 2 questions that we need to pass on to our engineer?
I would suggest that, I mean, I don't think it's out of the question except for towards the last third as we head towards Penn Place. If we want to put some gentle serpentine or curves in it. I think that's within reason. I don't think that the county would have an issue with that. I would be for that to give a little bit of meandering. As we get towards the end, though, I think it's going to become difficult. We'll start to eat into that green space between the curb and the slope. But I don't see a reason why we couldn't ask for a little bit of, meandering it on part of it.
That might be the best spot to put a bench anyway, or if that was considered to go further, make a pad for a bench. It would be a lot harder up by the tennis courts and there's a bunch of trees in there.
Yeah.
Have
Also-
benches down by the post office and we have a bench at the end of the tennis courts on the other side.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we need more benches on
Yeah,
that
maybe
part.
not.
But I'd like to just have as much planting area as possible and a nice big sidewalk.
Okay,
There.
so 5 foot sidewalk will contribute to erosion more so than the 4 foot we have, because it's that's
More
20%, 25% more surface that's gonna send water. And the 5 foot will cut down the planting space from 6 feet of green space to 5 feet of green space. So just wanted to make sure everybody voted yes on that, but just wanted to point that out. Barb, do you have any other questions or any other things in order to move forward with this?
I think there's answers to some of the questions. There seem to be a lot of ideas swirling around. I'm not sure exactly what they are and what I'm supposed to be transmitting on those items to Jason Azar. He can certainly, I can convey the 5 foot sidewalk. He's already aware, I think, of the desire to have some kind of gentle curves. I can tell him no railing.
But yes, a 6-inch.
But
curve.
yeah, I'm not sure. There seem to be some other ideas out there. I'm just not sure I understand fully what those are and how they would impact the sidewalk design.
Well, the only other one that I have that we've talked about is to drop a conduit in place for some type of future lighting, and that would run
He's a,
end
yeah,
to end.
and he's
Yeah.
aware of that.
And I just don't understand how this works. A single conduit would be able to handle however many fixtures we deem appropriate, or we need multiple conduits for
No.
just a
Single
single
conduit.
one manages
A
everything.
single one,
Electrical power.
right, and bring a
Correct.
tee
And
off
we can
from it.
branch it off however much we want.
Exactly.
Correct.
Yes,
At-
definitely.
At where, what our choice of location, we can
Okay.
branch off of it. But if we drop it in now, then they just have to dig it up at the point where we
Right.
put the light in.
Okay, so Steve, is there anything, just wanting to narrow this, is there something else that we need to consider prior to moving forward with this, something so that Barb doesn't have a question about
Well,
conveying?
and I also just want to make sure I don't get Jason designing and then have him redesign.
Right.
I would put together a sketch maybe that shows the terracing and what could happen on the other side. And I guess that could really happen with a curb or without it. I just don't know. It might be good to get his feedback is if that was an idea that was favored to do that kind of terracing on the other side, would that be better to not have a curb for stormwater? Or
Yeah,
would
if
it
you
be
want to
better
send me a sketch, I can
Yeah.
send that to him.
But you're also concerned, Steve, that it's gonna start to settle and move, and you're saying you think you need a retaining wall.
I think we need what we need. I think we need what we have on Montrose. I'm really kind of surprised
So
that you would
that's,
say it wouldn't
I
need
can ask
that.
him that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
'cause I don't want it to slow move after we do it.
And I guess the other nuance of what I'm saying is I think Jason may be thinking about putting the sidewalk in at the level it is, which is like a foot lower than the street, where I think it might be more useful to have it up level with the street or level with the curb. So you're not like walking back down to it. Maybe I'm the only person that feels like that's beneficial, but I think it would be beneficial.
Have we seen a plan of what he's talking about yet?
No, Phil had asked for one. Basically, I think just as a reminder, Jason Azar, at my direction, has been on hold since last fall because I was trying to avoid spending money needlessly on design when there seemed to be so many elements in play.
Right.
So no, there's a simple sketch plan, and then he's been on hold.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we're also gonna ask if the concept of terracing would be harmed by a 6-inch curb.
Yeah.
On the slope side, and whether it would be beneficial to raise the sidewalk to be level with the street.
Right. Just one thing I would note, once we start getting outside, I had envisioned, and I think we talked about this during the budget process, the likelihood of using highway user funds for the sidewalk. If there are elements that are not specifically related to a sidewalk, some of these amenities that are being discussed, that cannot, highway user funds cannot be used for
We
that.
can't use it at all.
We can use it for a sidewalk. You can use it for elements such as lighting roadway lighting, curbs, things like that. I think if we're starting to get into more design elements like terracing and things that aren't specifically related to the sidewalk, it would just be town funds. It's not that we can't do it. It just means that it just needs to be a different funding source than highway user fund.
For those additional elements. We
Correct.
would still be able to use highway user funds.
For the sidewalk,
For
yeah.
the pieces that are allowed.
Anything that's specifically related to the sidewalk itself.
All right,
It's fine.
okay.
Okay.
10:32.
Yeah.
All right. Councilmember Bennett. The Arboretum Committee, any updates there?
Just very quickly, over the summer, the committee will be focusing on education of the broader community, on both the benefits of the Arboretum to the town and other interesting elements, but also on tree preservation, tree canopy preservation and invasives on private property in town, and also beginning work on fall planting list.
Beginning work on what? The fall planting
The
list?
fall
Is that what you said?
planting list. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Councilmember Max, Archives Committee. I know we've got in a few weeks, we've got the
The
big
art
celebration.
committee is planning their big event on May 21st in the town hall right here. There's going to be a lot of treasures of our archives that'll be on display. We've got a lot of food coming from Grosvenor Market. Our next meeting is tomorrow night to finalize the plans for the 125th anniversary. We do have Doug Mader is going to be singing with his barbershop quartet. I think it's going to be a really great event. I hope a lot of people come. May 21st.
Okay. Councilmember Paskowski, Historic Preservation update.
Preservation, just have a few notes from Nancy here. So the last meeting, a lot of discussion about that B&O water tank / reservoir, which we talked about further earlier. Still working on the walking tour. And one of the things where the committee's been debating is how much use there might be for it. So is it better to have like a GPS sort of walking tour that you would do on your phone, or is it better to have just more just a broader spectrum of information on a town website? Might be easier to update that. So we're really trying to figure out.
I like the idea of having everything together so that there's not like a walking tour for this and a walking tour for that, but that it's
Yeah.
more overlapped and it's,
Yeah.
I'm standing in front of town hall. What are the Arboretum elements? What are the historical elements? What are the, like, so for what it's worth, I
Yeah, I
think not a just
kind of
standalone.
thinking that more of that too, like might be better to have like a broader array of information than just a limited array. Like right now, the walking tour really just covers a couple blocks, and one of the things I'd like to see is like to see it really be more town-wide, and we were thinking it could be something where you do like a GPS enabled walking tour. In a lot of other places, the GPS will know where you're walking to tell you what's ahead of you. Maybe we just don't need that. Maybe we do. And weren't sure how many residents would really use that versus thinking it's kind of cool to talk about. So, so if there is any feedback from residents on that, on what they would prefer, or what they think they would use, it'd probably be helpful to get it to Nancy Walls or myself. We'd like to fold that in.
Right.
And she also talked about the Chevy House tour is still planned for next year. It's tentative, scheduled for the last Sunday in April of next year. So that would be the 100th anniversary of when the Chevy houses were started.
Very
Not
cool.
not that day, but that year.
Yeah.
So
Okay, you have here, you wanted to talk about capital expenditures planning. Can I suggest that you've shared that information with us? Is this something that we can digest and
yeah,
talk
talk
at a
about
different
another
time?
time. Yeah.
Okay,
Excuse me, so Susan comments on what not printing the other thing?
sorry, I was not,
It's very late, I'm letting you said no.
I mean, is there a piece of it? Understood. I hear you. I hear you. No, I think it was just an oversight on my part. Is there, yes, I would be delighted to hear what you,
I'm not,
please.
I'm not the person who keeps you, you know.
No,
Please do.
we've done that on our own. We've done that on our own.
Still Chris Kelly, I'm still from 4501.
Are you sure?
I was intrigued because I was on the council in 2002 and I did a little inflation calculator. $25,000 is about $43,000 today.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm here to talk about the sidewalk and particularly to urge you to look at it comprehensively and not slice off a piece and then try to, after the fact, retrofit things. I think the analogous project is not SRTS, which was unique. It was federal, it involved only sidewalks and gutters. We've had several projects in town that are far more anomalous because they involve sidewalks and lighting. If you drove into town in the 90s on Strathmore Avenue, a state highway, there was highway illumination. Big overhead, high intensity Cobra headlights only over the intersections. It was dark the rest of the beach block. You turned into Garrett Park where we own our roads, we have our rights of way, we control the lighting. It was exactly the same. It was high intensity Cobra headlights only at intersections. And around 97, we changed that for everything except the area around Penn Place. As I know you've gone and looked, there are still 4 big Cobra headlights there. That's the extent of the lighting. The rest of the 4600 block of Waverly is pitch dark. The thing that has changed in the last 20 years is that stretch is used a lot more by pedestrians because we have the Black Market Bistro.
And
the post office has been there forever.
yeah, but people still go there, walk there.
Some people go after dark because they don't like, anyway, but the big change is pedestrian use of the 4600 block. So I implore you to use a 5-foot sidewalk. It's 5 feet all the way up Waverly and Kenilworth to Strathmore. It makes no sense to narrow it.
Nope, we unanimously
On that.
approved the 5 feet.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's 4 feet on the other side of Montrose, though, all the way up to.
And
Strathmore.
I think it's 5, but in any event, it's the most heavily, except for the street, the sidewalks by the school, it's the most heavily used in town. But please do it comprehensively with lighting. Go back after the fact and figure out where the conduits are going to go and the pads for the lights and so on. First of all, you'll lose the momentum once the sidewalk's in. That's
So
it.
I appreciate that.
25 years ago, we said we would return
Right.
lighting that block as soon as Penn Place got finished.
Right. So
And
I,
we're sitting here in 2023 with still
Right.
the Cobra headlights.
so I think I'm confident that there's no intention of it not being discussed and planned simultaneous to this, but rather that that we won't be contracting with the sidewalk constructors, builders, rather we would hire separately, but that it would be done simultaneously.
And let me just disabuse you of something. The county does not own the town right of, the town right of way obtains irrespective of who owns the adjacent property. The town has right of way for my house, your house,
Right.
and adjacent to the county tennis courts. Look at a map, it shows the property limits. We have a wide right of way. We have used it since at least the 1970s. We plant trees on that side of the sidewalk for the Memorial Grove. I don't think you need to feel that you're constrained by the fact that there's a county park along 2/3 of the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
For the record, I've also been pushing to light it, and that's the reason for the conduit, and we'll probably be discussing that more later.
Okay, so Steve included something, long range planning ideas. I'm sorry, please. No. If you wanted to, I mean, we got your comments. Okay.
Interesting article in yesterday's post by Dan Milbank about municipal lighting. It'll just, if you're serious about considering lighting contemporaneous with the sidewalk,
There's no reason to think
not-
that we're not.
and not as an after the fact.
There's
Yeah.
no reason to think that we're not. We're absolutely committed to that. Anybody else have anything to say about this? Okay, so,
More comments from residents or?
all right. So, Steve gave us, long-range planning ideas for looking at capital budget. So, this, I think, is something that we should consider, as well as some other things, related to sort of big picture of how we do our work in, as a body. So I would ask that you all look at this and we can, talk about it at some future time.
Mhm.
Not indefinitely, but just
Yeah.
not today.
Not at
Phil.
10:43.
Thanks. 10:43. Phil, you wanted to talk about the resident on Weymouth.
So
But
the
a concern about the
resident on
driveway?
Weymouth has sent pictures. I will forward them to the rest of everybody, but basically the concern is that their driveway, the angle coming in and out of their driveway is such that bottoms causes cars to bottom out because the approach angle is really bad. So I think in order to fix this, we need to have somebody come in, pay somebody to come in like a Jason or somebody to take a look to see what could be done. Now, they said they had just redone their driveway, but they didn't do the apron because they weren't allowed to, quote unquote. But I think it's going to require a little more than just a simple fix. It's, I think. And for that reason, I'm bringing it up because I'd like to ask Barb to put out a task order to
Sure.
work with Jason to do this, and I can be happy to work with you, obviously, on this.
So, is there some larger element of apron looking that we should do as part of this, or should this be a one-off thing? Are we, this sounds kind of heartless, but are we going to do this because the resident said, hey, can you do this? I mean, or is this something that is maybe not questionable, whether it's our responsibility? I mean, I just don't know what the thing is, but I don't want to just assume resident says, hey, please spend thousands of dollars so we can do this.
Yeah, we haven't actually a interesting provision in our code that I've never seen before that actually says if a resident replaces their driveway apron, that the town will reimburse them at the cost of.
Yeah.
Montgomery County, like some kind of index that they use. It came up with another resident who had approached me about this. So I guess the question becomes, is this something that I bring that provision to the residents' attention and they deal with it? Do we want Jason to come out and look at it? I'm not suggesting one's more appropriate than the other. But I guess I'm just suggesting that it may not be a one-off because of the provision in our code that says if someone does replace their driveway apron, we're, within certain cost estimates, we're responsible
But they
anyway.
did replace it is what.
They
No,
did
I'm just
not.
saying that they would have some financial support just under the code provision that we have anyway, just
If
like
we
any other,
replace it.
just like any other resident would. Yeah.
So they would probably get it done quicker if they handled it on their own and then asked us for
Yeah,
reimbursement.
they have certain specs they're supposed to follow. I mean, Phil, do you have a preference? Do you want me to bring that to the residents' attention or?
Because of this one, I'm going to suggest at first we have Jason look
Okay.
at it, and here's why, because we don't know what the resident would do, and if what the resident would do is going to cost more.
Right.
We do know that there may be a couple more of these on that same street. I'm pretty sure there are. So my thought was, if we had somebody who does this for a living come out and take at least a brief look to say, oh, they should just lower the apron, and this is how,
Grade problem.
it's a grade problem.
It goes into a sloped driveway. They can
Right.
end up spending money and it doesn't fix the problem.
Right.
If it's a contractor doing it, that doesn't know.
And so I'm just a little concerned at what the cost would be. Obviously, we'd be limited to the apron.
Right.
But let's at least look and see, have somebody look at it just to
Okay.
see what they think might be the best thing, and we can just apply that to the future in similar situations.
Okay. Is everyone good with that? I'll reach out to Jason tomorrow.
All right, time is 10:47. Adjourned.
Nice.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.